Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is Blair, or the Illuminati, and today we're talking about an MLM we all know and love to hate, Avon. Now, Avon is a Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is Blair, or the Illuminati, and today we're talking about an MLM we all know and love to hate. One of the most infamous of the lot. Avon. Now, Avon is a lot like Amway. They're both ancient titans of the MLM world. Hell, Amway is the largest MLM out there, whereas Avon is the second largest. Not to mention, Avon is over 130 years old, so you know there's going to be plenty of dirt to dig up here. But before we get into the good stuff, we're going to talk about who Avon is, why they were founded, and the early years, as per usual, so let's get right into it. Avon began with David Hall McConnell. He was born and settled in Oswego, New York in 1845 and entered the business life in 1879. David sold books door to door and in 1880 moved to Atlanta, Georgia. In his travels as a book salesman, McConnell made two important discoveries. First, he quickly noticed that his female customers were far more interested in the free perfume samples he offered than they were his books. He made these fragrances himself to serve as door openers when he traveled from home to home. Second, McConnell saw women struggling to make ends meet and recognized in many of them natural salespeople who would easily relate to other women and passionately market the products his new company would first sell: perfumes. Women didn't have the right to vote until 1920, so understandably, many women jumped at this opportunity to give themselves some financial freedom. Even though I'm against MLMs, I get why this was the only option. MLMs today throw around the word empowering until it loses its meaning. But back then, this really was an empowering decision for them, considering women didn't have the freedom to do much else, really. Avon began to expand and file trademarks. By 1902, the company was selling a full range of cosmetics. In 1905, their first full-color catalog was released, and in 1939, the name Avon was adopted after Shakespeare's hometown, Stratford-on-Avon. And yeah, I don't really know why they chose that name either, but that's the history of it. But it is undoubtedly factual that they were doing very well. In 1920, they sold $1 million worth of products. By today's standards, that's about $13 million of products. For a while, things seemed to be looking up for Avon. They bought Tiffany, the jewelry company, in 1979, however, they sold it 5 years later. Guess that one didn't work out. Still, Avon was determined to sell jewelry for some reason and bought a different jewelry company, Silpada, in 2010. And I guess they didn't learn their lesson there because, big surprise, it failed too. Though they bought the company for $650 million cash, they ended up selling it for only $85 million just to get it off their hands, and that's a pretty big loss. Alright, now that we know Avon's history as a business, let's look at what they're selling today. I decided to check out their makeup first, since that's what most people know them for. Their lipsticks had decent ratings and were $10 for each matte tube. Now, I don't know if this is just me or some weird thing going on with their site, but when I hovered over some of the lipsticks, it showed an entirely different color from what I was looking at. Like, I'd hover over a light pink color and it would show a dark plum shade, so that was at least confusing to me, but maybe that was just a me thing on this particular night when I was looking at the website, I don't know. It also says there's a lower price on lipsticks, $10 instead of $14, $12 instead of $15 if you shop with a representative, things like that. So not only are they pressuring you to support them as an MLM, but the products are, well, less than impressive. I can get an NYX lipstick for cheaper and not support an MLM while doing it. Avon is also selling face masks now, which just comes over as super tacky and it rubs me the wrong way. Can you imagine some Avon lady coming to your door or flooding your social media feed saying, "Oh my gosh, hun, you've got to buy face masks from us. Look at all these colors." Now, I know hun bots have flooded basically every market imaginable, and it's super pushy and cringy, but $12 for a mask? Plus, there's the whole save a certain amount of money on these too if you buy it through a hun bot. I'm sorry, I meant representative, through a representative. Now, I've heard of other companies using their facilities to make masks, but that's usually to donate them to help shortages or to sell them to the public for dirt cheap. Old Navy is selling them for $2.50 as of writing this, so where does Avon get off charging $10 for one? They're also selling gloves and charging $20 for hand soaps under this shield yourself category on their website, which is pretty obviously new to take advantage of the whole pandemic situation. Now, as for the jewelry they're so desperate to sell, it's just not all that impressive to me, to be honest. Their bracelets look like bracelets you could find anywhere. The fine jewelry is the same kind of story. I mean, nothing really looked unique. I could walk into a Kohl's and find the same jewelry, honestly. Everything is something you could buy somewhere else. It's no wonder they failed with Tiffany. I don't get why they're so desperate to be a jewelry company, but this is something they still keep trying to do, and it's just clearly not working for them. Now, if it's because they're trying to earn more money, find new facets, new things to sell, then that's one thing, but there's thousands of jewelry companies out there, and you've got to be original stand out, and they just can't seem to capture the whole being original portion of that whole thing. But otherwise, nothing seemed particularly harmful at a first glance. It was just boring, plain, average quality, and these days that isn't going to stand out much against other larger beauty products, brands, or even indie sellers, not when the industry is exploding. So at one point, Avon may have been helping a lot of women, and that's just simply not the case now. Over the recent years, they've actually been on a steady decline, and I won't pretend they haven't done any good. I'll give credit where credit is due. Avon became the first global beauty company in China to refuse to test on animals for cosmetics, and that is a big deal, and a good one. They've also donated millions of dollars towards ending domestic violence and towards the American Cancer Society for breast cancer research. Those are all great things, and I want to acknowledge that even a bad company can do good occasionally. It is just unfortunate that there's a pattern of behavior here that's quite concerning. One of those notable things is their history of bribery accusations. On April 13th, 2008, it was reported that Avon Products Inc., the world's top direct seller of cosmetics, suspended 4 executives pending an internal investigation of bribery allegations in China, sending its shares down 8%. Avon asked 3 executives in Asia and another in New York to take administrative leave of absence pending the probe's outcome, company officials confirmed on Tuesday. The company's investigation focuses on compliance with the U.S. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, FCPA, a law that outlaws bribery of foreign officials. In June 2008, Avon began an investigation into its China operations over an allegation of improper expenses for items like travel and entertainment on behalf of a Chinese government official. And this situation took years to end, until 2014 in fact, at which time Avon spent hundreds of millions of dollars on the settlement and their lawyers. No bribery charge is a good bribery charge, but this one is especially disgusting. Avon violated the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act by bribing officers that oversaw direct selling regulations in China. Assistant Attorney General Leslie R. Cadwell said public companies that discover bribes paid to foreign officials and fail to stop them do so at their own peril. Companies that cook their books to hide improper payments will face criminal penalties, as Avon China's guilty plea demonstrates, she said. Not only did Avon bribe these people, but they then essentially wrote it off as travel entertainment at meals, when this cash was truly being used to commit a crime. For years in China, it was Avon calling, as Avon bestowed millions of dollars in gifts and other things on Chinese government officials in return for business benefits. Avon China was in the door-to-door influence peddling business, and for years its corporate parent, rather than putting an end to the practice, conspired to cover it up. Avon has now agreed to adopt rigorous internal controls and to the appointment of a monitor to ensure that reforms are instituted and maintained. When corporations knowingly engage in bribery in order to obtain and retain contracts, it disrupts the level playing field to which all businesses are entitled, said FBI Assistant Director in Charge McCabe. Companies who attempt to advance their businesses through foreign bribery should be on notice. The FBI, with our law enforcement partners, is continuing to push this unacceptable practice out of the business playbook by investigating companies who ignore the law. And I feel like some words just can't even begin to explain how serious and messed up this is. I've seen some pretty horrible MLMs and outright disturbing, fatal products. As much as that sometimes worries me, it's MLMs that think they're above the law and break it for years that seem to fly under the radar that really gets me, and this statement is not limited to MLMs, this is any company that thinks they're above the law. This was going on for at least 4 years, and there's no way in hell the higher-ups at Avon could have been unaware of this. They knew, and they allowed it to happen. Worse, they didn't just turn a blind eye, but actively supported the behavior by writing the cash off as travel, food, and entertainment when it clearly was not. Now, around this time in 2013, Avon closed in France. Whether that's because of the ongoing legal battle with the whole bribery scheme we mentioned or not, I'm not sure. but they shut their doors without a month's warning. Not only is this shady, but it goes directly against Avon's supposed values. Here's what the BBC reported in 2013. Avon has been in France for almost 50 years. It employs about 120 staff in Paris, supporting 11,000 representatives who visit customers in their own homes. Angry workers in France have accused Avon of keeping them in the dark for months and not acting in line with Avon's publicly stated values of being a socially responsible company that upholds values of trust, respect, and integrity, and a culture of open and candid communication. Estelle Croissant, which, yes, that's her name, I get it, Avon France, haha, funny joke, croissant baguette, I'm here for it. Anyway, Estelle Croissant, an Avon employee responsible for supporting the direct selling representatives, told the BBC that a workers' council representing Avon staff in France was challenging the company for not allowing the correct redundancy process. They have not respected all of the processes according to their own rules and values, she said. We now know an administrator has been in place since May last year, but no scheme to assist the workers is yet in place. We just feel abandoned. We knew that this business was not good, but we have all been very committed and worked relentlessly over many months to help the company to try and become profitable. So essentially, someone knew for months that Avon was leaving France, and the workers were only given a couple weeks' notice. That's bad enough, right? You'd think they'd get a ton of backlash and never do something this callous again, right? No, well, it actually gets worse. Avon announced via Facebook that it planned to exit Australia and the New Zealand markets. People were quick to comment, and understandably so. I have been a rep for over 30 years, and to find this out on Facebook is disgusting. So much for loyalty, I'm sure they could have sent us all a letter, Jenny Drummond wrote. This is terrible. You owe your reps and customers more than this. To suddenly cease operations after a long history in this country is nothing more than an absolute smack in the face to long-serving reps, new reps, and customers, Lola Luciano wrote. People who had only recently signed up as representatives were particularly stunned. I only started 2 weeks ago, in fact, last week was my first order, wrote Lynn Wilby. Why let me sign up and spend over $200 knowing this was going to happen? And that is the question. Why the hell did Avon think this was a good idea to announce this on Facebook before every one of their reps knew what was going on behind the lines? It's really just beyond me. Their communication skills are so far past insulting. And this is a multi-billion-dollar company. They should know better. You'd see some serious fury if a giant supermarket or retail chain did this to their employees. And I really think this just goes to show that this is how MLMs operate at the end of the day. They do not care about their direct sellers. They don't care how well or how poor they do, and they just don't even really care about their quality of life in general. They're treated as replaceable, disposable numbers, not people. And I mean, sure, you can argue that at least there was a bit of a heads up on this one for the Australian and New Zealand markets, but that's really no excuse for the way these sellers were treated. Now, aside from their shady business practices, their advertising also has left a lot to be desired. I want to start off with their Super Bowl commercial, where a Hunbot literally says,
I can't get fired, I can't get laid off, it's my business.
Yeah, okay, how about you tell that to the hundreds of people in France, Australia, and New Zealand? Just, this attitude just pisses me off so much. But they have another ad that exactly says this thing over and over with a woman singing, I'm a boss, to the tune of I will survive, and it's so freaking degrading. Like, you're a boss, you can't get fired is the script they want to write, but they also fired thousands in the year before that, and they posted this on their YouTube. Like, that's just crazy insensitive to me. I mean, if I was one of those employees from one of those 3 countries watching this ad, I'd be fuming. They've also had controversial advertisements in terms of body shaming. One of their ads in 2019 read, "Dimples are cute on your face but not on your thighs." In actuality, it's less normal to have no cellulite whatsoever. Even young, healthy women have it, about 80 to 90% of women in fact, so ladies and gents, if y'all got cellulite out there, it's okay. It's literally called being human, and it's normal. But what's funny is using the same model, same backdrop, same everything, they also have the nerve to say in another advertisement that all bodies are beautiful, so bit of mixed messages going on here. Am I beautiful or filled with not so cute lines on my thighs, Avon? Care to explain? And I get it that beauty brands can sometimes walk a very fine line because things can get picked apart these days, and hell, I wouldn't want to be in charge of promoting something that can get rid of cellulite without making cellulite seem like a bad thing. Now, they did apologize and remove this because this ad was obviously controversial, but it's the other two ads with the deceptive boss babe attitude one that just seems a little bit more disturbing to me, although both are bad. But we're not done here, and we're far from it. Avon had two recent lawsuits that took it from being a shady MLM with some problems overseas to a business on the decline. One class action lawsuit alleges that Avon discriminates against pregnant women. The suit alleges Avon distinguishes itself from mainstream companies based on its passionate commitment to empowering women, and that because of this branding, women spend millions on Avon products. The suit goes on to allege that because of this branding, women apply to work at Avon believing that the company will empower them to succeed and provide women opportunities for advancement. In the complaint we filed today on behalf of our clients individually and on behalf of a proposed U.S. class of pregnant employees and a New York class of women that were discriminated against because they needed to pump breast milk during work hours, Avon must account for why the company for women allows such discrimination to occur and why male leaders of Avon insist on silencing women through the use of forced arbitration to handle complaints rather than the transparent court system, said Janine M. Christensen, a partner at Wigdor LLP, the law firm handling the suit, in an emailed statement. One woman in the lawsuit, Ruiz, was made aware of performance issues a day after she told Avon she was pregnant. She asked to work from home because her pregnancy was high risk and was denied and then fired. Another woman, Kristanoska, was subject to discriminatory, hostile working conditions and an unsafe work environment once she disclosed she was pregnant. She was a microbiologist at Avon and asked if she could avoid particular tasks while at work to avoid unsafe chemicals that pose risks for pregnant women. Her boss insisted she continue to work with potentially harmful chemicals. The suit alleges that the workplace was hostile to her during her pregnancy, after she returned from maternity leave, when she was breastfeeding, when she disclosed her second pregnancy, and when she requested again not to work with chemicals that could harm her pregnancy. The suit also alleges that her superior confronted her in 2016 when she stated documenting her hostile work environment and started yelling about her efforts. After reporting the incident, she was transferred to a department she had no experience in for a position she was unqualified for and was constructively discharged 2 weeks later, according to the lawsuit. So yeah, Avon is all for women until they get pregnant or need to breastfeed, I suppose. Super empowering. They're branded as the champion of women, but so far we've seen them harass pregnant women, fire people without warning that have been working for them for years, and push less than savory beauty advertisements. That's not the champion I'd like, thanks. The lawsuit was settled this year in January, so it's not as if I'm dragging up some dark, long-buried past here either. This was only a couple months ago. Even while I was doing research on this case, I found another class action lawsuit filed only last year on April 12, 2019, and this one was for misclassifying workers as independent contractors to make them exempt from labor protections. The 45-page case against Avon Products, New Avon, and Cerebus Capital Management challenges the alleged systematically illegal employment practices affecting Avon workers with the title of District Sales Manager. The case claims these workers were designated by Avon as independent contractors when they should have been considered bona fide employees and entitled to the workplace protections afforded to such. Avon's alleged misclassification of the workers, the suit's two named plaintiffs claimed, marks an attempt by the direct beauty product seller to avoid various duties and obligations owed under California and federal labor laws. And we've seen this before with other MLMs like Cutco. Even when you work your way up to a district manager position in the sort of corporate position that would no longer be Hunbot territory, it still is when you look at their books. One of these rights that they were stripped of is called WARN, the Worker Adjustment Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act. They didn't provide 60-day notice when mass layoffs took place from January 21st to June 30th, 2017. Specifically, on January 21st, 2017, defendants terminated approximately 140 employees. Thereafter, on February 24th, 2017, defendants terminated additional employees, including plaintiff. Finally, on June 30th, 2017, defendants terminated hundreds of additional employees. Such mass termination resulted in employment loss at the facility for at least 33% of the employees, excluding part-time employees. Plaintiffs and members of the Warren plaintiff class were not provided with notice of such termination 60 days in advance thereof. The lawsuit alleges that this also includes a failure to provide meal breaks, overtime, any breaks really, and basic rights you have at a job. But the shit keeps getting better. To see if this case was resolved, and it doesn't seem to be, by the way, since it was only filed last year, I looked up California Avon lawsuit to see if any more information could be available. And guess what I found? Another lawsuit! This one from 2013. It alleges the exact same thing as the one I was just looking at, and apparently that one was settled for $1.8 million in 2016. And then no, I'm not joking, but I found yet another one. Avon hasn't had just one district manager sue them because they were classified as an independent contractor, not paid overtime, or given workers' rights. They haven't had just 2 lawsuits, but it looks like they've actually had 3, and that's just what I could find about them not giving proper work rights. I'm sure there's probably more somewhere elsewhere. But seriously, I had to go through these tabs over and over and over to make sure I wasn't getting any of them mixed up because they all seem so similar, and yet when you look at the details, they're all different. But then there's one that was filed last year, 2019, and the lawsuit is entitled Rogel versus Avon. And there's one I found through Nelson, the former district manager, that was filed in 2013. But then there's even another lawsuit that looks like it ended in 2013 from Don Potter Law. And there isn't a ton of information out there about Morrow versus Avon apparently, and I find it weirdly suspicious how all these lawsuits from one to last year, the gigantic one in 2013, and this one, all are just conveniently missing from Avon's Wikipedia page. Now, for those of you that do look at my sources that I list in my description box in every single video, there's a pastebin link right at the very top for like all of these videos, you'll notice that Wikipedia is always a source in there, and some of you guys have been critical of me using Wikipedia. Now let me explain my reasons why. Wikipedia is really good to set up a general timeline. While it may not provide the most accurate information, it can provide me a general layout of where to go, of where to look for things to research. It also happens to be what pops up a vast majority of the time when a consumer is looking for that company. So it's a good insight to see if you were someone looking into Avon, if you were unsure because your friend started selling it, what would you do? You'd type in Avon and a Wikipedia page would pop up. So it's really good to look at that as well and see what is being publicly put out there and very, very easily accessible when I'm crafting these videos. So I find it really interesting that none of these lawsuits popped up. There's no sections for lawsuits, nothing. I've got no clue why this might be the case, but it's definitely interesting and not super normal either. Just because a case isn't settled doesn't mean the public shouldn't know about it, right? I mean, if I were applying to Avon, I'd want to know if they have a pattern of this type of abuse and treating their workers badly, and unfortunately, that's the case here. Though there's multiple factors for why Avon is on the decline, I have no doubt this is one of them. They've been missing their first quarter sales goals, falling about 10% each year for the past few years now, and you don't see them online as much, certainly not the way you see Beachbody, Unique, or Arbonne. Last May, it was reported that the company's loss widened to $32.7 million or 9 cents per share in the first quarter ended March 31st from $20.3 million or 6 cents per share a year earlier. That May marked the 10th straight quarter their active representative count went down, and obviously I hope the numbers continue to plummet. The less MLMs out there, the better. But just before we wrap up today's video, we're gonna go over the numbers. It brings me a lot of joy to expose just how empowering these businesses truly are, especially from a company that's all about being your own boss and then, firing everyone without little notice whatsoever. According to the calculations done by the finance guy, the average Avon rep makes under $25 per week, and that's less than $100 a month. Minimum wage is $7.25, so as long as these hunbots are working more than 13 hours a month, they're getting paid less than the minimum wage. Even from their own recent reports, everything seems to be on a slow and steady decline. Not to mention, if they're losing representatives, this means people are losing their downline. I can't imagine it's easy to recruit to this company when they're actively dying. I don't seem to see it has much of a presence as other MLMs, and their makeup products are mediocre to average at best. And it's not that the unbiased reviews were all trash talk, but I didn't exactly see anyone fall in love with products either. Granted, those are very few unbiased opinions out there. Just about any review you'll find has some sort of link to buy the products through them or through someone they know. Overall, the only good this company has done is support breast cancer research and domestic abuse charities. With the damage they've done and how they treat their employees, though, I don't think that alone could make them something worth supporting. It's like Unique or Pure Romance. A fraction of a percent may go towards actually supporting women, but the rest of it goes towards bringing women down, paying them less than minimum wage, firing people without any notice whatsoever, or simply because they're pregnant. Yeah, what a champion for women we've got here. But all in all, I really hope that Avon does continue to decline until eventually they go under. Things seem to be on that route even if they've managed to stay alive this long. What they did overseas to pregnant employees and district managers, I found really disheartening and disgusting. No one, no individual business, nothing can empower women with that kind of attitude. So with that being said, that's where I'm going to end today's video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to hit that like button, and if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. If you want more content from me, pop open my description box. You're going to find links to all my sources for this video, my second channel for my puppy Casper, collaboration channel with Sad Milk, all of my social media, and a whole bunch of good stuff will be down below. So again, guys, thank you so much for making it to another video. I love you so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!
This is Webflow. Meet the design tool from the future. The most powerful
Hello everybody, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Blair, or the Illuminati, and today I'm talking about another shady company. Although the name Tencent may not be all that familiar to you, I'm sure some of their affiliates, like Nintendo, are. Tencent doesn't seem to be as obviously criminal as some of the other businesses and MLMs and, well, cults that I've covered on the channel, they operate a little bit more
This
behind the
is
scenes with the
Webflow.
shadiness.
Meet
So
the
with all
design
of that
tool
being
from the
said, let's get
future.
into it
The
and
most
start by
powerful
taking a look at who Tencent is and what it is that they do. Tencent is, in short, a Chinese holding company with subsidiaries that specialize in tech, internet services, artificial intelligence, and the like. According to a 2018 article by MarketWatch, they rank 7th in the world's largest tech giant list. Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, and Alibaba are all ranked above them. Netflix, Ant Financial, and eBay are at spots 8, 9, and 10, respectively. Needless to say, they're huge and, as Bloomberg reported, the world's biggest games company. This alone isn't a crime. I won't go after a company simply because of their size. It's just unfortunate that it seems the more money you have, the more you can get away with, sweep things under the rug, and hide any of your less than ethical activities. Tencent, as we'll see in a minute, does an excellent job of falling into that very gray area at a first glance. On their About Us page, Tencent says they use technology to enrich the lives of internet users. Our financial technology and business services support our partners' business growth and assist their digital upgrade. We invest heavily in talent and technological innovation, actively participating in the development of the industry. Tencent was founded in Shenzhen, China in 1998 and listed on the main board of the Stock Exchange of Hong Kong since June 2004. Now, surprisingly enough, 1998 wasn't all that long ago. At least that's what I'd like to think. Otherwise, I'm about to feel really old during this research. So you'd think that a company that rose to such heights must have been profitable from the onset, right? Well, not necessarily. Tencent didn't start with success, but a lawsuit. Only 1 year into the business in 1999, Tencent released a messenger product called OICQ, which is supposed to mean Open ICQ. However, ICQ was already a thing. It was a messenger app owned by AOL that predated AIM. And fun fact, ICQ is actually still around today. I don't know if anyone uses it, but someone must, because it was updated just a few months ago with a new logo, software, and the whole works. But anyway, so obviously AIM was pissed. You can't just slap the word open or an O in front of the messenger service that already exists and call it your own. So Tencent changed the name to QQ, which was supposed to imply the word cute, and yeah, I don't really get it either, but whatever, and they went on their merry way. But QQ, even with its rocky start, broke world records for the largest amount of simultaneous users online. Tencent started to grow, profit, and license games. Bloomberg Businessweek reported in 2011 that the company decided to enter the game market seriously in 2007, led in part by Martin Lau, a former Goldman Sachs banker who joined Tencent in 2005 and is now its president. Tencent sourced South Korea for new game properties, licensed and adapted them for Chinese users, and linked them to its massively popular QQ service. By 2008, the users of QQ chat software would, with a few clicks, call up for a shoot-'em-up called Crossfire or a fantasy role-playing game called Dungeon and Fighter, both developed by South Korean companies. Tencent licenses those games and splits the virtual goods revenue with their creators. A farm simulation game called QQ Farm, like Zynga's Farmville in the US, is a version of a game called Happy Farm by the Chinese game maker 5 Minutes. Some of Tencent's other popular games, though, were built in-house, and they aren't exactly unique. A racing game called QQ Speed closely resembles Kart Racer, created by South Korea's Nexon. Ah yes, Farmville. Peak internet gaming culture. I remember those days. They were dark times on Facebook. But seriously, there was a time when I was a teenager when I felt like almost all my friends were watering virtual farms and growing crops, and now there's maybe just a handful of people left that bother with it and somehow manage to send me 10 notifications a day for it. But anyway, Tencent was cashing in on that craze too, just in China with their own versions. Again, none of this is inherently bad. Making a product people love and getting paid stupid money for it isn't a crime. But it's the other language in this Bloomberg article that concerns me and falls into that very shady behavior / gray area I mentioned earlier. Around the time Tencent began making money, they began making poor choices too. The same article reported that recent events may have forced Tencent to play nicer. Last fall, the company, which bundles antivirus software with QQ, was drawn into a public spat with Beijing security software maker Qihoo360, which I'm sorry for butchering that, with both sides accusing the other of anti-competitive behavior and spying on its users, which, sorry, that's funny for the Chinese government. But anyway, the Chinese government rebuked Tencent and Qihoo, the Minister of Information Technology, called both immoral and irresponsible. I'm sorry, I'm trying to read this article, but come on. It's immoral and irresponsible to spy on your users. Okay, sure, but anyway. But before, both users were spooked and both companies were widely criticized by the local media. One former Tencent employee who does not want to be named because he plans to do business with Tencent says the intensity of the criticism was a wake-up call that forced Pony Ma and his colleagues to recognize that they need to do a better job courting favor with other Chinese high-tech companies. Now, I won't pretend for a second that Tencent is the only company accused of doing this. The article itself stated that Qihoo was accused of doing the same thing. But this is their first strike, one of the first notable actions that caught my eye. And from what I can see, there wasn't a reason for it. Seriously, Tencent was doing incredible on their own, shelling out hundreds of millions of dollars to acquire gaming studios and making stupid money at the time. Their revenue is in the hundreds of billions. Their total equity as of 2019 was somewhere close to $500 billion. I'm not saying that they were worth that in 2011, but they had broken records. We're not talking about a small gaming company looking at other developers for inspiration, but a titan of the industry using shady tactics to take down competitors. Tencent's power obviously grew, and with it, so did their influence. One prime example of this has been their relationship with Riot Games, just one of the many game developers Tencent has their hand in. Now, before we get into specifics, I want you to imagine something. Imagine that you've developed your own video game. It's your pride and joy, your baby, and people love it. In fact, it's one of the most famous video games out there. A gigantic corporation, one that owns stock in your game, wants to milk this for all it's worth. They ask you if you'll turn it into a mobile game, but you know that's not what your vision for this was, so you decline. Then that same company, the one that was supposed to be your parent company, goes behind your back and makes a mobile game without your consent that is a ripoff of the game you made. Wouldn't you be just a bit fucking devastated and outraged? Well, that's exactly what Tencent did with League of Legends. According to .esports, when mobile gaming began to overtake hardcore gaming, Tencent apparently approached Riot about turning its only game, League of Legends, into a mobile title. Riot declined, saying that the game's experience couldn't be replicated on smartphones. Tencent then reportedly created their own mobile game, Wangzi Rongyeo, sorry for butchering that, roughly translated to English as Honor of Kings, in 2015. When Riot discovered early screenshots of the game, which now arrived in North America as Arena of Valor, some employees were not happy. "We were stunned," one of the former Riot staffers that the information interviewed said. "They were blatantly ripping off our intellectual property." Riot reportedly brought these concerns to Tencent, and Tencent responded by changing its own game enough to sell as a standalone product with no relation to League. The game then went on to be the most popular smartphone game in China by the end of 2017, according to the report. Riot supposedly wasn't a fan of King's sudden popularity, according to the interviews with those close to Riot by the information. And look, rip-off games happen a lot, and they happen all the time. The amount of Candy Crush rip-offs out there or similar games to that, it's insane, and it's, god, it clogs up my Instagram feed, but whatever. But it's kind of ironic that there's so many of those Candy Crush rip-off games, considering that Candy Crush itself is a rip-off of a game called Candy Swipe, but whatever. The number 2048 number mobile games makes it a pain to find out which one is the original. In short, mobile games getting copied isn't new. So I understand some people typing away in the comments, oh, it doesn't matter that League was copied on mobile, it's not the same. But what's important to remember is that Tencent is Riot Games' parent company. This isn't a new gaming company trying to cash in on someone else's success and steal their ideas. It's Tencent going against the wishes of someone they're supposed to be supporting. I'm not sure if that makes it better or worse, or it's downright theft, but it's shitty all the same. Plus, Honor of Kings is not only one of the most influential mobile games in China, but it's a close enough copycat that we've got people on Reddit assuming Riot had been given permission for this game to exist in the first place. To further rub salt in the wound, Tencent reportedly used notable League players to promote the King's mobile game, which again would sure as hell lead a consumer to believe that Riot gave them permission, if not help develop Honor of Kings in the first place. Now, all that said, Riot was apparently able to work through these problems. As of August 13th, 2018, Riot said League numbers are down from their peak, but it's still one of the most played games in the world, and we're very happy with the numbers, and we think some of the new content we're putting out soon can only help with player numbers, Riot said. Basically, League is doing incredibly well by any measure except by its very own high watermark. The relationship with Tencent is the best it's ever been. We've talked to Rioters about it a fair amount back in February, and while the Arena of Valor situation wasn't great, we've we've worked through it and leadership's take that made the partnership stronger. We're working together toward an exciting future, both for League and our upcoming games. So Riot forgave them and moved on, at least publicly, and that's awesome, I guess. I mean, it doesn't seem like they had much of a choice in what was going to happen anyway, but hey, good news is good news, right? Well, this isn't the only time Tencent has used their obscene amount of control to affect the games industry, and because if it was, I wouldn't be making this video. Now, one of their stranger activities has been promoting Chinese Communist Party propaganda. Now, I'm not trying to get all political here and accuse every patriotic game they make as a propaganda. I mean, a game celebrating a country isn't automatically political, I guess. Okay. Anyway, though, listen, they literally released a game called Clap for Xi Jinping, an awesome speech. I mean, personally, I don't find tapping away at my smartphone to clap for a political party a form of entertainment, but go off, I guess. It's just that it's not this game alone that bothers me. Tencent literally partnered with the Communist Party Propaganda Department. Yes, that is an actual department. Propaganda, in case you didn't know, is information that is designed to be misleading and politically biased. Getting into China's political system is not something I signed up for today, but there's more of it to come. Last year, Reuters reported that Chinese gaming companies, including giants like Tencent and NetEase, unveiled new titles at an industry meet that show off socialist values and patriotic themes amid stricter state censorship and push to back Communist Party propaganda. Titles showcased at China Digital Entertainment Expo and Conference, known as China Joy, ranged from the ones that promoted domestic culture to others that recounted the country's history, such as Shenggu Games' codename South China Sea, which allows users to run a coastal town set in the Ming Dynasty. At first, this seems innocent enough, right? I mean, it sounds educational almost, learning about a country's history through a game. There's nothing wrong with that, and I mean, heck, I would be interested in something like that, but, you know, if there was nothing wrong with that, I wouldn't speak on it. Reuters goes on to say that Tencent said it was collaborating with state newspaper People's Daily to roll out a new game, Homeland Dream, and with the propaganda department of the Communist Party's Guangdong arm on a title called Story of My Home. Players of Homeland Dream, for example, will be tasked to develop a city and will need to execute policies like poverty alleviation and tax reduction, which are key goals of Beijing under the current president. China has pushed to cleanse online content from video streaming to games to meet strict rules banning material that goes against Communist Party values. Gaming companies need to seriously consider social effects and always steer in the right direction of politics, value, content theme, and quality, and never provide platforms and channels for the wrong views and low taste. So yeah, that's gonna be one fat yikes on trikes from me. I'm not saying Tencent should get shut down, but this isn't a company I'd want to support either. I wouldn't want to support a tech giant coming out with games that have me learn about history from a skewed point of view, whether it be right, left, or wherever the heck the Chinese government falls. But I try to be about the facts, and honestly, with these games, well, they're working with a propaganda department, alright? So it's not going to be 100% factual. That's just the facts. Of course, though, this isn't the end. Generally speaking here, one of the people's biggest issues with Tencent is simply that they own too damn much. They have too much power, too much to say. Not only do they own Riot Games, but they have full ownership of the Norwegian publisher Funcom and the Swedish developer Sharkmob. They have 80% ownership of the New Zealand company Grinding Gears Games, known for the game Path of Exile, and 84% ownership in the Finnish mobile game developer Supercell, which makes Clash of Clans and Clash Royale. They own 40% of Epic Games used to launch Fortnite, 30% of the Japanese publisher and developer Marvelous, 17.66% ownership in the South Korean mobile developer Netmarble, 15% of American games developer Glue Mobile, and so on and so forth. So why should we care? What's the problem with them owning a bunch of game developers? Well, it's not just Tencent's monopoly and level of ownership that might be a bit overwhelming, but the facts that things do change when they own these companies. Some YouTubers, such as Riker, say that even though he believes Tencent will be a hands-off kind of parent company, his concern is with microtransactions.
I do believe that this acquisition is a concern for Path of Exile, but the reason being that Path of Exile's business model revolves around microtransactions, and a lot of people spent money on microtransactions simply to support Grinding Gear games.
He poses the question, will the community still support Grinding Gear games when they're not an indie company?
It used to be this David and Goliath story. You had the small indie dev and Path of Exile going up against the giant Activision Blizzard and Diablo 3. You had this small grassroots team depending on its player base to support the game versus the giant corporate money machine. You know, some of the microtransactions in the game are quite pricey, but that was okay because it was more of a means of supporting the developer. But now GGG isn't an indie dev anymore. They're part of the Tencent money machine.
For a lot of gamers, Riker explains, it felt like a David and Goliath situation, and they were okay with spending a little bit more money to support a little guy, a smaller company fending for themselves without piles of cash that other developers had. Now, being acquired by Tencent, the company may not feel that way anymore. This is undoubtedly a reality not only in the gaming world, but in just about any other industry you can think of. The big guys buy out the little guy, the big company gets bigger, that's no surprise here. But as Tencent grows, so do the questions asking how much control is too much. One example of their control is a really recent one, with the Nintendo Switch system. Apparently, Tencent has control of Nintendo Switches and the games in China. I can keep playing Animal Crossing in peace since they're only partnered with Tencent in China, but the fact that Nintendo is working with Tencent is just kind of a bummer, honestly. I have no doubt it's to get their games out to millions of potential customers and gain access to the Chinese market because Tencent, by all accounts, has been the only way into that market in the first place. But it still just kinda sucks. Business Insider reported late last year that after decades of being locked out of China, Nintendo is finally breaking in, albeit through the Chinese conglomerate Tencent. The two companies announced a collaboration back in April that finally enables a Nintendo game console, the Switch, to launch in China, the largest gaming market in the world. The deal also enables some of Nintendo's biggest Switch games to launch in China, but it sounds like Tencent's ambitions with Nintendo don't end with the Chinese collaboration. What we want is to expand from China, and one target is console gamers in the US and Europe, an unidentified Tencent staffer told the Wall Street Journal in a piece published over the weekend. We hope to create console games with Nintendo characters and learn the essence of making console games from Nintendo engineers. That's a pretty major goal, and especially bold given Nintendo's history of being extremely protective of its characters and properties. The company is famously careful about which companies it allows to make games with its properties and has retained a reputation for quality control as a result. Now, Nintendo, if for some strange reason you're listening, please continue to be productive. Also, please release Pikmin 4. Pretty sure seeing Nintendo in some propaganda game with subliminal messaging about how to vote would ruin a lot of childhood memories for me, apart from the gigantic loss of respect I'd have by letting you let influential characters be used that way. Now, maybe I'm leaping and bounding to conclusions over here, but I'm assuming the worst. What can I say? Doing a lot of these deep dives on shady businesses, I can safely say that I don't really see the best possible result happening from this, but that's purely opinion, obviously. As of this year, there have been quite a few criticisms about how Tencent Nintendo Switches and Tencent games are region-locked. In other words, people living in China have a much smaller variety of games to play and won't be able to connect to online servers for imported games. As WCCF Tech states, there are two simple reasons for this: control and greed. The inability for players outside of China to play a copy of the game keeps Chinese and ROW players separated, keeping the Great Firewall intact. Furthermore, it enables Nintendo to stop people importing copies of games. These titles are also priced as considerably lower than those outside of China, approximately $40 within China, $60 outside of China. Essentially, Nintendo forbidding these Chinese copies from working on non-Tencent consoles ensures that people won't be able to purchase the games at a more favorable rate. All of the above applies to digital copies of games too. Again, they own too much. So much that they're getting sued for being a monopoly. These are, again, the levels of greed that we're talking about here. One of their most popular messaging apps, WeChat, like the Chinese version of WhatsApp, came into question in December of 2019. One report reads, Chinese social media giant Tencent Holdings stood trial in a Beijing court Monday in an anti-monopoly suit, including the operator of the hugely popular messaging app WeChat of abusing its market position. The dispute between the Hong Kong-listed company and Zhang arose in April after Zhang tried to share links from two Tencent rivals, e-commerce Taobao and the short video app TikTok, via a WeChat messaging app. Instead of being able to share the links with one click, Zhang said videos from TikTok could only be posted on WeChat after Zhang downloaded the videos to his phone and then uploaded them into the WeChat app. Similarly, Zhang said he could not directly share links from Taobao.com, but had to copy and paste the links manually. Zhang is demanding compensation of 20,500 2,500 won, which is approximately 2,900 US dollars, as well as a public apology from Tencent. He also wants the company to stop restricting links from its rivals. Meanwhile, Tencent has also been locked in a bitter legal battle with TikTok owner ByteDance after Tencent last year blocked the direct playback of TikTok videos on WeChat. Zhang Yiming, the founder of CEO ByteDance, publicly accused Tencent of unfairly diminishing market competition. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, oh god, not being able to share a TikTok video through an app, oh how horrible, your life is so hard, and it's not worth a lawsuit. And I'll admit that, initially reading through the suit, I didn't think much of it. It's not a big deal, just find another way to send the link, right? Well, the next lawsuit, the Citizens Power for China, is preparing to launch, shows how this competitive monitoring system from WeChat can be taken to the extremes, and I mean with worldwide repercussions. On February 6, 2020, coronavirus whistleblower Dr. Li Wenliang died of the virus as well as from suppression of speech, leaving behind a rousing yet commonsensical remark: a healthy society should not have just one voice. Meanwhile, the coronavirus continues to ravage because the truth is hidden. The virus is now threatening the lives of millions of Chinese people and people around the world. All of a sudden, Chinese people are awakened. Letting people speak their minds is not life-threatening. However, silencing people costs the lives of many. The voice for freedom of speech is unprecedentedly strong and eager. Dr. Li Wenliang's story started from him posting a message on a WeChat group chat. He mentioned that there are 7 confirmed cases of SARS at Huanan Seafood Market. The latest news is that have been confirmed to be coronavirus infections. WeChat's monitoring led to his eventual doom. Experts estimate that over 1 billion citizens living in China use WeChat, and another 100 to 120 million people outside of China use WeChat. WeChat has become an indispensable part of their daily communication and indeed of their lives. Therefore, it is arguable that the Chinese people's freedom of speech is to a certain extent the freedom of speech on WeChat. Li, one of the multiple doctors that was a whistleblower trying to warn people about COVID-19, had to deal with WeChat's monitoring. Remember how the news mentioned how a Chinese messaging app was censoring certain words around COVID among all the crazy news reports at the time? Well, yeah, it's this app, and Tencent is the company. The monopolies, the shady behavior, it has all the red flags. Bad behavior, though nothing we haven't really seen before, or at least some kind of equivalency. But it's this that has people up in arms, and deservedly so. WeChat is one of many reasons that people in China demand free speech from their government. They're fucking aided by the government in hiding COVID cases. It just can't really get worse than that. Well, I can't really say that. I'm sure there's worse things going on in China, honestly, that we just don't know. Imagine Facebook Messenger censoring words about the pandemic when you're trying to talk to your friends about what's going on. This goes so much deeper than refusing to link a TikTok or a competitor's link. The BBC reported Toronto-based research group Citizen Lab found that WeChat blocked combinations of the words and criticism with President Xi Jinping. The report also found that WeChat, owned by Chinese firm Tencent, blocked more words as the outbreak grew. China has for years censored what its people read and say online, but this report suggests China began censoring discussions weeks before officials began acknowledging the severity of the outbreak. It was on the 31st of December that China first alerted the World Health Organization to an outbreak of a new coronavirus in the city of Wuhan. But authorities initially withheld information from the public, underreporting the number of people infected, downplaying the risks, and failing to provide timely information that could have saved lives. It's the early warning signs, the refusing to link competitors, and the many buyouts, all of which people should be wary of. I'm not trying to make anyone paranoid here or sound like a conspiracy theorist, but it's during difficult times like a pandemic when people need to know that the places or companies that they're getting information from are safe, or at least know that they have a bias so that they understand what information is being passed through to them. WeChat is controlled by the government, and from the looks of things, as is Tencent, and any company that suppresses free speech is one I can't really support. I can't say for certain that if this hadn't happened, more people would have survived, but we can only speculate. So with that being said, why isn't Tencent in more trouble? After everything they've done, these damages that they've caused? Well, It's odd that on their own Wikipedia page, the controversies are pretty minimal. There's a case about Tencent taking a news platform, Toutiao, to court for defamation. They demanded 1 won, or 16 cents, and an apology. Toutiao sued Tencent in turn for spreading false and damaging information on its WeChat platform and sought 1 million won, about $155,000, in compensation and an apology as well. Another controversy listed was where Tencent products apparently cheated antivirus or anti-malware tests to seem more impressive than what they were. However, Tencent was the only company stripped of its ranking in these tests. PC World said the following: both Tencent and Qihoo finished among the top 6 anti-malware vendors in the AV test results released in March, which ranks the firms on protection, the performance of its engines, and how usable they were. But they will apparently no longer appear on the official list, just as a college basketball team can be retroactively stripped of their victories and individual awards if improprieties are involved. No one likes a cheater, but cheating on antivirus benchmarks potentially puts users at risk if the product they choose doesn't actually provide the protection it seems to. The testing firms are also protecting their own credibility in rating these products. Now, don't get me wrong, these topics do belong on the controversy section of Wikipedia, but compared to what we just heard, they kind of pale in comparison. Cheating on an antivirus benchmark, yeah, that's fucked up. But they've endangered lives by restricting freedom of speech and mentioning on the page too. I mean, hell, I was able to find an article about how Tencent distributed 1.2 million face masks to medical staff in April with no problem. But as of writing this, there's nothing about WeChat or COVID, maybe because it's something they don't exactly want on their page if I had to guess. Tencent, make no mistake, can't get away with just about anything. Not only have they censored language on WeChat, but they try to censor anyone that disagrees with them. As a tech giant, they seem to get away with it. The Financial Times reported in August 2019 that Tencent has long had a potent tool for muzzling critics: shut down their accounts. But in recent months, the Chinese social media group has changed tact, slapping multi-million renminbi defamation lawsuits on 3 bloggers who wrote about the company on its ubiquitous WeChat app. It's very weird, said Yan, who was faced with a $140,000 equivalent defamation lawsuit from Tencent in March after writing an article about the dominance of the super powerful WeChat platform and its potential for data breaches. If Tencent questioned my comments, they could have stopped me publishing them on WeChat, but they just directly appealed to the court and sued me. Tencent declined to comment on the cases, but in a document submitted in May after a court hearing against Ma, another one of the bloggers, it said it opted against deleting the offending articles on WeChat because doing so would further cause damage to Tencent's reputation. For defendants, defamation suits have big repercussions. While Tencent's lawsuits against its critics have so far been civil cases precluding jail sentences, the large sums demanded as compensation can be financially crippling. So there you have it, one of the world's largest tech companies suing its own critics. It's not really surprising with the censoring on WeChat, but it is disturbing to see. Sure, the issues with League of Legends and their mobile game was greedy and a low blow, but it's unfortunately something we've come to expect. Tech giants don't play nice. But this kind of censorship is a whole new level, and what they will admit to, the antiviral cheating and the issues with the news source, don't even begin to paint the whole picture of what this company is really about. Again, I really don't want to get too political by saying all of this, but as long as Tencent is working with a government that doesn't allow for free speech, these problems will only get worse. And it's their people, from bloggers to game developers to average citizens looking for unbiased information, that will continue to suffer the results. So with all of that being said, that's where I'm going to end today's video. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. I know there's still so much more we can add to Tencent, but I just wanted to give kind of a brief overview of what this company has going on for itself. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to hit that like button. If you're new to the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button. If you want more content from me, you can pop open my description box. You're going to find links to all of my social media, second channel, all sorts of shenanigans. They're all going to be in the description box. So again, guys, thanks so much for watching the video. Love you, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys!
By the good people on patreon.com/alphajshow.
My social media, second channel, all sorts of shenanigans. They're all going to be in the description box. So again, guys, thanks so much for watching the video. Love you, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys!
by the good people on patreon.com/alphajshow.
My social media, second channel, all sorts of shenanigans, they're all going to be in the description box. So again, guys, thanks so much for watching the video. Love you, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys. Thanks so much for watching the video. Love you, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.
If the 2010s told me anything, it's that we've definitely made a step in the right direction, in proving that animation can be taken seriously. Adventure Time, Regular Show, Steven Universe, and The Amazing World of Gumball transcended their primarily children audiences to grow a more mature fan base through their respect to the medium and attention to storytelling. Gravity Falls, BoJack Horseman, and Legends of Korra showed us that animation can be widely beloved by an older audience without being looked at like a kid's show. Spider-Verse, Incredibles 2, Isle of Dogs, in the past year alone, let alone a decade, took animation to greater heights, despite being looked at as for kids. Even MLP, SpongeBob, Family Guy carved out their beginnings of this community and brought a lot of us together, even if we don't want to admit it. The 2010s will be the decade in which those who are passionate about animation got their hands behind the tools to make it at scale for the masses. However, the 2010s will also be known for something else. It will be known as the decade in which cartoons changed their connotation.
The current generations that are producing animation never really had that exposure to Looney Tunes. It wasn't something they were watching growing up. And if you look at a lot of cartoons today, you see a lot of cartoons that kind of feel like The Simpsons. It's because that's what they grew up with. That's the cartoons they were passionate about when they were kids. And so you're seeing this kind of move towards a little more of a realistic approach, or just a more of a tactile, like everything's a little more logical, and a lot of it's based on dialogue.
There's been a serious decline of wacky cartoony shows in this decade when it comes to the big guys. DuckTales, Craig of the Creek, The Loud House, Clarence, Teen Titans Go, Milo Murphy's Law, all comedy shows, but animation-wise are pretty realistic. You're not gonna see tons of exaggeration, squashing and stretching, eyes popping out of their heads on many shows today. It's about the story, lore, world building, shipping on your Tumblr. Oh wait, that's no longer shipping on your aminos. Oh, it's gonna be such a great time. Now, obviously we do have shows that are cartoony, like Wabbit, OKKO, Uncle Grandpa, heck, even SpongeBob took on a more wacky approach. But you can say that majority of shows on right now are more serious, more down to earth, and go down a calmer path.
Where I grew up with Looney Tunes, and I'm like, I haven't seen those kind of energetic, fun, silly, animated cartoons in a long time. And I just said, well, I'll just make one. You know, I'll do it. I'll try to do it. And I know a lot of people who want to do that. And so we sat down and tried to.
So it's safe to see why Craig McCracken's latest show, Wander Over Yonder, stood out so well. But we're not there yet.
This is it!
Welcome to Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends.
Can I help you guys? Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. Premiering up. Blue, I'm not moving away.
May 3rd, 2009, after a 6-hour marathon of the series, Craig McCracken's second and final Cartoon Network show, Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, would conclude with 4 new episodes and the finale, Goodbye to Blue. Being on its 6th season, including a few shorts, McCracken himself believed that the show was becoming more of a challenge to keep fresh. This Newsarama article puts it best: the fact that the show won 5 Emmys is up there as a pretty awesome highlight, and having a float in the Macy's Thanksgiving Parade for 3 years was unbelievable. But really, it's the shows. I'm crazy proud of the work we did on Foster's, and the fact that it worked just the way we wanted to. He would go on to dip his magically talented toe in the pilots of Uncle Grandpa and Regular Show, as well as work on Chowder, The Powerpuff Girls Rule, and My Little Pony. But it would be when he resigned, after 15 years of employment on Cartoon Network, that he started to work on his new show, Wander Over Yonder.
Wander was just a character I started drawing in my sketchbooks around 2007, and I just started drawing this kind of wandering nomadic hippie guy, and I just liked him. I would draw him walking around in nature, And then not a few years, but a little bit right after that, Jack McBrayer contacted my agent and said he was a huge animation fan. He loved cartoons and he wanted to meet me. So I went to lunch with him. And as I was hanging out with Jack and talking to him, as I was sitting there, I'm like, I think I've just met Wander. I think this is Wander. He's the guy. He's that friendly. He's that nice. He's that earnest. He's that positive, and he's that sweet. And I was like, just taking Jack's voice and my drawings, and all of a sudden this character started to develop and this show started to kind of come to life.
And it would be set to air August 16th, 2013 on Disney Channel. So to bring you up to speed if you haven't heard of the show before, Wander Over Yonder is a comedic, episodic for the most part show about an overly optimistic galactic traveler Wander and his trusty steed, who's the muscle of the group, Sylvia. They travel from planet to planet and mess around with Lord Hater and his army of watchdogs. What better way to show you this than with the first episode?
Soon, at the precise moment of the cosmic conjunction. Hater! You remember me, right?
They set the standard of Lord Hater being so angered by Wander that he doesn't focus on what truly matters to him. His second in command, Commander Peepers, frequently tries to get him back on track, as the goal is to rule the universe, or at least the galaxy. So the many side characters you may see, like this shark dude, also has the same goal: to rule the galaxy. You'll probably hear me say this more often than I should, but I enjoy the art style. It's vivid, it's colorful, which helps with the fun and playful aesthetic, and it seems tailor-made for the show. Contrast this with how Simpsons, Futurama, and Disenchantment can all legitimately be in the same universe because of art style alone. And I'm not saying it's a sin to keep a consistent art style, but with purpose. And it would have made sense to use the Foster style, for example, both art style and pacing here. Another thing I like is that the action is fast. If you're tired of shows being too reliant on non-physical humor and tons of waiting, then this show is for you. For example, in The Picnic, despite the concept being whoever stands under this tomb-like structure when the planets align gets a wish, there isn't a time when it's solely that. It's often interspliced with Lord Hater's sheer hatred for Wander, Shark Dude's wit, Wander's incompetence, and this war. Nothing too violent, but for Disney standards, pretty violent at times. You'd expect something like this on Cartoon Network, and I'm wondering why he pitched it to Disney instead.
Latch. Oh, will you? Come on, just undo the latch. No, not the... What is he doing?
When things do slow down, it's for that, the comedic purposes. Unless it's like Family Guy, where they take that exact same joke and stretch it to a minute or two to try to complete the cycle of thinking that it's funny, to thinking that it's not funny, to thinking that it's funny again. They don't do that here. I also love the designs of these characters. Most things in this universe seems to not be sharp, and less sharp than many cartoons. It's the parts that are sharp that are much more worth it. So as the two leaders are fighting, Wander wanders in and pretty much messes up things for Lord Hater. Now, based off the interview, one of Craig's goals with the show is for you to love the show based off the main character, and that you can plop the main character in any scenario and he'll do incredibly well. He wants Wander to transcend the normal, or even good protagonist, and become our decade SpongeBob breakout star. Well, even if this were to be, we won't know now, similar to how no one can tell you 100% that Ed, Edd and Eddy was going to be a big hit episode 1, my only concern is that...
You want a sandwich? They're really good! Come on! I only have turkey left, but I'll let you pick!
I don't want a sandwich!
I'll just leave this here in case you change your mind.
It's the mustard.
I wonder how many people think that's funny and not annoying. One thing with quite a few episodes is that Lord Hater is actually not as evil as his design, composure, and actions would tell you. If anything, this reminds me of SpongeBob and Squidward post-movie at times. Now yes, Lord Hater does wreak havoc, do things that are rude, and lead pretty incompetently. But in this episode, all you see him on is the defense. If I were a new viewer, I'd have no idea if this is how it would always be or not. So it's very interesting that they chose this as a first episode.
You lose, Haiti! The universe is...
So, I'll be the one granting your wish today.
Yes, I wish.
You know, Hater, when you're right, you're right. Best spot
Never! I wish you would leave me alone for 5 seconds!
Yeah, okay, I can swing that.
No, I mean...
So Lord Hater is not going to get what he wants, but rather waste his wish on getting Wander to leave him alone for 5 seconds. Unfortunately, that counts as a wish. Of course, an intergalactic magical ritual wish giver doesn't provide a confirmation on the wish. But there goes his chance, and of course, this sets the norm that Wander will always be a thorn in Hater's plans, regardless of if he likes it or not. So now that you have a feel for the episodes, I think it's only fair to talk about... I want to make something super clear about the... So now that you have a feel for the episodes, I think it's only fair to talk about... I want to make something super clear about the rise. There are 43 episodes in total when it comes to Wander Over Yonder. This breaks down into 79 segments in 2 seasons. Of these 79 segments, how many of them do you think aired on Disney Channel, the bigger of the 2 networks, and how many of them aired on Disney XD, the much smaller of the 2 networks? Do you think half? Well, if you do, that's pretty modest. I consider you a very generous fellow. How about a quarter of 79, so like 19? No. 14 segments of a 79 segment long show aired on Disney Channel. Only 8 episodes by production code aired on Disney Channel out of 43 episodes. That is 18%, and I cannot figure out why. I scoured the same news outlets that announced the show, and all they have news on is that it doesn't continue, but why would Disney do this? The ratings were incredibly solid, so it couldn't have been that. It couldn't have been that the show tanked, right? So I developed a plan. Let's compare it. Let's compare it to other shows that were airing new episodes in 2013. So that would be Gravity Falls, Phineas and Ferb, and Fishhooks, if we're counting original animated programming. So as you see on the screen, Wander Over Yonder basically had a natural dip from the high 2 millions to the mid 2 millions, as many shows after their pilots do. Phineas and Ferb would go as high as 3.76 to as low as 1.70 million. Granted, a large portion of this season was on the app, and this is Disney's cash cow, its front runner, it's SpongeBob, so maybe not count this. Gravity Falls would have been concluding its first season to also be on Disney XD, but luckily that show ended and wasn't cancelled with 2 more seasons written. It also got an average of about low to mid 3 million range in terms of viewers, with some dipping a little lower or a little higher. Fishhooks would be at the end of its 2nd season, and the start of its 3rd season, racking up a consistent 2 million some viewership. So getting back over to Wander Over Yonder, that was doing as high as 3.13 and as low as 1.91. So it couldn't have been because of ratings, it couldn't even be based off of projection. If Disney based its first 14 episodes to predict the show was going to be crap, then why would you keep DuckTales on? Now obviously adjust this to today's standards of good ratings, but it only seemed to improve from its low start. So unless Disney is a giant hypocrite with double standards, which is plausible, it couldn't be because of ratings or projection. Could it be episode quality? Possibly, but let me show you these 14 episodes in a broad sense. I don't want to stay on them too long, and I want you to come to a conclusion based off of what you see and what you hear. The Picnic. That was the first episode, we just went over that. Weak episode in a few areas, but overall fine, I suppose. The Greatest. Lord Hater competes against Wander in a series of challenges to see if he's the greatest in the galaxy.
Oh, this guy makes me so mad. I just want to go to his bony little face and... But come on, you gotta be crazy to try and stop Hater. Right, Wander? Wander?
This was a much more fun episode, with there being a competitive element here, than rather, I'm just gonna poke you and watch you overreact. It also sets up the standard that Lord Hater wishes to be the greatest in the galaxy. Overall recommend. The Egg. Wander and Sylvia try to return an egg to a nest belonging to a beast who Wander thinks is the egg's mother. I love this episode because it was a constant struggle back and forth. It had wackiness, but was also action-packed with a clear goal, and it had a moral underlining it, the complete package, rather than being the shining billboard it could be. This is one of the few rare great Sylvia episodes, with her being a great counterbalance to Wander's actions, supporting the story rather than padding it up with the obvious pushback she'll give to Wander's actions. The Fugitives. When Wander and Sylvia become fugitives, Sylvia's escape plans constantly fail when Wander ignores them to help someone.
That's gets better.
A pretty good example of when Wander over Yonder can get very predictable. I think it was pretty clear how helping everyone would come back to help him. And a good deterrent to me thinking that this episode is tried, true, and played out would be to add comedy. However, they played the story extremely straight, and I didn't find any of it endearing. The good deed. Every time Wander does a good deed, it causes something bad to happen as a result. A marvelous episode. I love the fact that it being simple, it had a layer of unpredictability to it. Yes, the structure was pretty bare bones, but what some episodes lack is that combination of funny and unpredictability that this episode manages to find a sweet spot in. The ending scene had Wander actually lose hope, which while yes, we don't need to happen every episode, the rare time it does, it gives this emotion weight. I'd recommend it. The Pet. When Wander and Sylvia board an abandoned spaceship, they encounter a horrifying alien monster pet that is bent on attacking them, which Wander names Captain Tim.
What a neat trick, Captain Tim!
Sylvia sees the wild beast as a threat, but Wander takes a liking to the ferocious little monster and tries to train it to be his pet. This had incredible visuals on it, and even though I don't really care much for the whole
new world every show, they're in a new galaxy with new aliens and new creatures.
Selling point, when I see visuals like this, I do appreciate it. As far as the pet itself, his design is gross, but I love it. I love how angry he is, and the fact that he's a wild animal gives Wander that much of a challenge. Also, the fact that this pet comes back later in the series, which I won't spoil, is a cute way to develop what is essentially a feral wild beast. The prisoner. When Peepers takes Wander prisoner on Lord Hater's ship, he lets him get loose and must recatch him before Lord Hater finds out. This was a much needed episode to flesh out Peepers. I love this episode. It's one of my favorites in season 1. I love the fact that he doesn't see what we see in Wander, which is a ball of optimistic, hyper energy that you cannot contain. Also, it proves Lord Hater right that Wander isn't exactly aloof to the fact that he's trying to be captured and destroyed all the time. It's funny, and the other watchdogs provide a great role within this episode. The bad guy. Wander and Sylvia land in a town inhabited by bad guys and pretend to be bad themselves, so they can get to safety.
I'm a wanted man. 10 million credit reward for the capture of Badlands Dan. I'm a wanted man. 10 million in one credit reward for the capture of Wild Willy Wander.
Loved Wander acting like a bad guy. I mean, it is confusing that he could act like a bad guy here, but in other episodes he couldn't even muster up to not help someone or do a good deed. The consistency is as strong as these guys in the end. I won't spoil that. It's just a lot of playful mean mugging and different gangs and groups. I loved it, and Wander should be more like this if I were giving the character direction, rather than like in The Fugitives, where his niceness becomes near incompetence and annoyance for me at least. Love this episode through and through. The Troll. Prince Cashmere and his goat warriors of Valhalla work to fight a menacing troll, but Wander sits out.
Return from whence you came, and we shall not harm you.
Return from whence you came. I'm Cashmere, and I sound like this.
I think it was an okay episode. It covered the bases it needed to, and its solid execution made it not unwatchable. This was also the episode that made me think that 99% of these episodes are pretty much the same. Wander does one thing, Sylvia does another, Wander's way works every single time. They try to portray Sylvia as the smart one, but either each episode is in a bubble, or she's a full-blown idiot. Either way, the environment was okay, the side characters we meet is okay, so the episode overall is just that, okay. The only highlight of the episode was the enemy, and how they portrayed his strengths and weaknesses. The box. Wander and Sylvia must deliver a closed box, but Wander can't stop obsessing over opening it.
Pair of socks, pair of socks, pair of socks. Pair of socks, pair of socks, pair of socks. Pair of socks, pair of socks, pair of socks.
Give me the box.
Honestly, it was an okay episode turned poor, and I thought The Fugitives was a poor episode. No. This is. You can't build up the expectations of morals and Wander wanting to learn something new, or Sylvia learning that Wander's intuition is correct, to have episodes like this, especially when Sylvia is the main one that thinks that sometimes an enemy is just an enemy. More on that later. By that same logic, a box is just a box. It's literally the same logic, just toned down, and you can even make the argument that learning that a box is just a box is easier than an enemy is just an enemy, especially for someone as optimistic about the world as Wander. This episode goes against a lot of things the show stood for with its ending, and it was just flat out boring. Definitely the worst of the 14 episodes so far. The hat. Wander gets lost while he and Sylvia are being chased by a giant worm, and Sylvia uses Wander's hat in an attempt to find him.
What? I can't hear you!
Ring, ring, ring. I said, catch me!
This is another episode where Sylvia's stubbornness isn't used to make the episode entertaining, but annoying. It's one of those episodes where I'm screaming mentally, in my head. You're telling me you can't cut to the chase on this one? It has to be 11 minutes of this?
This hat doesn't give you what you want. It gives you what you need.
Doesn't give you what you want. It only gives you what you need.
The hat doesn't give you what you want, it gives you what you need. So no crap, anyone would have A half-working brain would figure this out. Plus, this world is 95% jumping on mushrooms that fall down. The little guy, the smallest watchdog, Wesley, is left behind while on a hunt for Wander and Sylvia and holds them prisoners until he can get them to Lord Hader, but eventually experiences a big change in heart.
So good.
This episode may be my favorite of season 1. It's adorable, it's super engaging, it kept me on the edge of my seat. In the grand scheme of Wander, this is one of those episodes where you didn't have to do it, but I appreciate it so much. It appears to be a special because it's longer than most, and essentially it's your standard little guy story. Little guy has big dreams, little guy gets laughed at by his peers, pretty much needs to be dragged and begrudgingly helped along the way, but Wesley is one of my favorite characters, at least side characters. His entire arc was covered within this episode, and I kind of want to review this as its own separate thing. The Ball. The two friends help the inhabitants of a planet defend themselves from a giant cosmic dog that mistakes the planet for a ball. This episode gives me the mood of the father that comes home to crying cranky kids for the 5,000th time, and he's all like, "Yes, dear." In fact, that was a cutaway scene in SpongeBob, so let me find it. Right here.
Coming to bed, honey? Yes, dear.
You see that face? That face he's giving right there? That was my face when I watched this. I mean, yes, sure, it's a perfect planet despite the fact that it keeps getting destroyed by the same thing for the same reason, but whatever, it's not a terrible episode. It's just okay. It's fine. It's not that funny. Sylvia's pretty much like any other character. And lastly, the 14th episode, The Bounty. Lord Hader hires 3 bounty hunters to capture Wander and Sylvia, but Commander Peepers tries to stop them so he can have all the glory to himself. This was a cool episode. I seem to lean towards Commander Peep / Watchdog episodes. I've noticed, I will give this episode this. The struggle of trying to get Wander and Sylvia himself is at least a breath of fresh air, where it isn't Wander doing something that obviously will work out in the end. Good episode. Phew. So as you can see, these 14 episodes all aired on Disney Channel, and they aren't horrible. Besides maybe the box, there isn't anything inherently terrible about any of these episodes. On the outside looking in, it just seems like a rash decision to do this. For any new people, let me explain. The reason why putting a show to Nicktoons, Disney XD, Boomerang isn't the best idea is because of the low viewership, which means lower revenue coming in because of that show, which reduces the incentive to keep it going, or put more money into it so that it performs the best. While one may look at the lack of competition there, that isn't enough to justify that many of these shows could go on and have more stories if companies push them properly from the beginning. Either that or merch sales. Merch sales seems to be the death of way too many cartoons. Either way, despite being about or over halfway through this video, the rise is actually shorter than I make it out to be. So now that you know that it was cut to Disney XD extremely quick, let's talk about...
The most common reaction to a birch arrangement is, I didn't know flowers could look like this. I'm Brittany Ash. I'm a floral artist and the founder and director of Birch. I use Squarespace as a tool to express what my business is to those who don't get to experience it in person. Squarespace, in a lot of ways, made me an actual business. I think it's the first thing that people look at. Without that platform, it doesn't really seem that legitimate.
I will separate the fall into 4 areas, starting with part 1. So there's something I want to show you of Disney animated shows. Let's see if you follow along. The Proud Family, 52 episodes. Fishhooks, 58 episodes. The Replacement, 52 episodes. Brandy and Mr. Whiskers, 39 episodes. The Emperor's New School, 52 episodes. Lilo and Stitch, 65 episodes. American Dragon Jake Long, 52 episodes. Now obviously, your Phineas and Ferbs, Kim Possibles, even their recent Mickey Mouse series have aired much, much longer. But it clearly isn't a luxury given out. Once you hit 52, it's highly unlikely on Disney you'll go over unless you're a hit, which makes sense. Now some of you may point out that it's basic business knowledge. Don't push something that isn't working. But then I must ask, can you point to where Wander Over Yonder wasn't working in a business sense? There seems to be a 52 episode hard cap, which is okay, just unusual. Wander was getting awfully close with 43 episodes or 79 segments. Could it be that Disney decided to cut ties really early and not let it hit its point? Would getting, let's see, 52 minus 43, 9 episodes in a season be a little empty? These are all valid things because again, it's that number that shows animated at least hit on Disney Channel. It's like a curse. I mean, I couldn't tell you, but I'd love to be a fly on the wall as to the true reason why. Now, I've gone near half or 3/4 into this video, and I've shied away from the unthinkable, the unfathomable, but I must address the elephant in the room. I know this may be a bad look for me, because I don't like Bunsen's a Beast, and I think it's the worst Butch Hartman show. I think Wander Over Yonder, Craig McCracken's latest incarnation, it's just not as good. And it doesn't hold up as much. I know a majority of people love the show. I know a majority of people are very grateful that I covered the show. Although I'd like to see where all these fans were when the show was on. Almost seemed like people enjoy a show more when it's poorly treated. Sorry. Almost seems like some people enjoy a show more because it's poorly treated. Not everyone, and I would never point my finger to anyone here. I mean, look at me, I reviewed the show once in a Disney Roundup, and it was my first time talking about the show. I could have covered it more and shown my support, but honestly, then and now, the show hasn't stuck to me. And one of the few major reasons why, this is one of them. Foster's to me is a show that hasn't been touched in many different areas, hasn't been surpassed in certain things that other shows try to do that Foster's did. It also has that Craig McCracken signature comedic elements, but when you put it next to the Powerpuff Girls, I love them both equally. I think both of them exude personality, with their strong main characters, a strong supporting cast, and a strong purpose. The Powerpuff Girls became a hit because it was an awesome action show with a great villain, funny mayor, awesome father, and great music, not to mention the narrator. Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends became a hit because of its incredible concept and execution, wacky cast, heartwarming stories, and strong main characters. Wander Over Yonder simply does not have many of these concepts. Great villain? Of course! I love Lord Hater and Commander Peeps. Strong purpose? Not really. Sometimes Wander wants to do good, other times he's literally post-sequel SpongeBob having fun at other people's expense. All I know is, Wander wants to do good. So does every other optimistic character out there. Great music? I'm not a country/banjo music hater, but this isn't exactly award-winning music composition. Heartwarming stories? Besides the little guy, this could swap with Mighty Magiswords and no one would bat an eye. Wacky cast? Hot take? Sylvia's just your poor man's Gloria from Madagascar. Cast? Hot take? Sylvia's just your poor man's Gloria from Madagascar. She's the sassy muscle, but like that's it. There's something off about her design that makes it just I get she's a trusty steed, but she doesn't have a lot of memorable episodes/moments to justify that amount of screen time. In fact, if anything, she's what's dragging the show down at times. She arbitrarily doesn't listen to Wander, which extends an already boring or solid but unspectacular episode out to its 11-minute mark. Now again, I'll be the first to say, I do love a lot of old shows more, sometimes more than the new shows, and I'm not gonna pretend like there isn't some bias when it comes to Craig McCracken shows. But at the same token, there are a lot of new shows that I love that do things better than old shows. Like for example, Gumball has better character design than Foster's, even though I appreciate the stories in Foster's more. I love the Powerpuff Girls, but I'm much more likely to watch DC Superhero Girls. Now, as a person who just praised it for half a century just now, this doesn't mean that I think it's a bad show. It just means that it's a good show, just not a great show. The third part is an extension of part 2 in a sense, but I want to focus on Wander. He was built up as this grand character who you'll watch the show for, alongside the fact that each episode is on a new world. Both of these things built up the show for this fun-loving, ultra-creative gem. when in reality, it couldn't have picked a worse time to debut a character like Wander. And the worlds? Let's talk about the worlds. Not to mention the fact that the show is about a traveler, so this being a selling point is like peanut butter and jelly, selling that each sandwich is a combination of two separate yummy things. It's literally something that you would imply if you heard the premise. But even then, the worlds are actually not that different. The people are actually not that different. This isn't a cartoon with different social classes, different governments, some planets don't have gravity, some crazy reality bending aspects. A lot of the planets are basically the same planet, just drawn differently or at a different altitude with different colors. So knowing this, it doesn't sell it for me. If you wanted to focus on world building, you probably would have did that with a more serious or at least a story-based show. At least then, you can focus on how the environment impacts people a lot more and not have to cram jokes down each episode. Wander is also just another overly optimistic, never give up, do-gooder, funny, weird but in a good way stand out from the rest of the show character that we already have like 8 others doing right now in one shape or another. What makes him stand out the most when he's taking what other characters are doing and just being the master of none of any of those traits. Not only that, but his intentions aren't as pure as they seem. Case in point, the Taurus. This was such a weird episode that I plucked out of watching it casually. It shows a side of Wander that I only seen in episodes like The Box, where his optimism turns into this weird, self-absorbed competitive edge that needs to do things his way. Heck, even with the ball, when Wander doesn't get his way, he turns the ship and runs it into the dog in an aggressive way. In that sense, with this context, with that logic, let's talk morals. Do I get a choice in being happy? Do I get a choice in being Wander's friend? Am I becoming friends with Wander because that leads to happiness, or because that is specifically what Wander wants? What if I don't want help from Wander? What if the only thing I want to do is crush things and destroy things? Well, Season 2 wishes to at least acknowledge some of these questions. It is now time to talk about 3 episodes in part 4. Season 2 premieres by showing that although things may never change in Season 1, Season 2 is going to change those things. All with a brand new villain. I love how this episode starts, with a dramatic shift in tone, a tone we don't see much of in the first season of Wander Over Yonder. This new villain would shift things permanently. Despite this, both Wander and Lord Hater offer their friendship and threats respectively to this new villain, despite a bigger ship, bigger weapons, and easier time destroying a planet. This is Lord Dominator. Much more focused, scarier, and powerful than Lord Hater, you'll notice that in quite a few episodes of Season 2, she doesn't have to struggle all that much to take down multiple foes. Her henchmen are not eyes, which Sylvia learns quick, and Dominator is not interested in befriending Wander. I love the design of the ship here. Maybe it's because I see the ship more than the episodic world of the week, but the sci-fi but really curvy design is something I dig. I also love the way they present the main villain of the show now, Ominous. You barely see them until you need to, as a true villain of you do not want to mess with them status should be. Wander still decides to befriend them, but it is the way that he does it that bothers me.
Perhaps you did not notice our gift from your new friend.
Again, do people have a choice in befriending Wander? If not, then it becomes unlikable. This aggressive stance makes Wander unlikable. We also get Commander Peepers telling Lord Hater essentially that his blind fury to catch Wander has led him to not have any planets. Hater, still in denial, freaks out because of Dominator having better stuff. This petty attitude, however, does work. You want to know why Lord Hater's petty attitude works, but Wander's doesn't? Because we are supposed to like Wander. We are supposed to cheer on Wander and his actions for the most part. We are supposed to find Lord Hater's actions antagonizing. Sometimes it's not exactly like that. I also enjoy when Hater freaks out. You see tiny scribblings of his character clipped here. Also, Tom Kenny's performance as Commander Peeps is great. It's like this Powerpuff Girls mayor / Ice King voice that really works well for the character.
Maybe this enemy is just an enemy.
I'm sorry, buddy. I know you always want to see the best in people, but sometimes there's nothing there to see.
If I'm gonna be the greatest in the galaxy again, I'm gonna start with whoever this loser is. Hey, Robodork! Lead! Let's rumble.
Both Wander and Hater have a half realization that maybe not all enemies can become friends, and maybe he's not the best in the galaxy, respectively, with Sylvia and Peepers trying to get them back on the realistic side of things. However, considering that this is the first episode of the second season, it's pretty much a fruitless attempt. Despite this, we do get our first extended glimpse at Dominator. I enjoy this silent but extremely powerful demeanor they have. However, on the other side,
This is for you! And that, and that, and that! I'm so sorry. No!
Sylvia, I don't think our new friend is very friendly.
You think?
I think this calls for the big guns.
he tries, and each time gets more and more frustrated. A part of me respects this, but not to the level in which I'd forgive its near infectious spread on the show. Sometimes this is okay. But this villain clearly isn't Lord Hater, it's a different beast. Speaking of Lord Hater, once he sees Wander and Sylvia apprehended, he turns into a different beast. This is a subtle but well appreciated way to show how Wander is inadvertently the true fuel to defeat Lord Dominator, at least for now, and to show that Lord Hater isn't always a joke, he can be a legitimate threat. Too bad it's only in short bursts, and it takes a lot out of the guy, I see. Luckily, even though all four characters are getting their butts handed to them, Peepers saves the day. Or really the lava. Flip a coin.
I like to believe that an enemy is just a friend you haven't made yet. But after your rude and inconsiderate behavior today, I'm not sure I want to be your friend.
I know this is supposed to be like a grand turning point for Wander's character, as he has major doubt of Dominator, but I just see this as Wander finally failing at winning. Which I shouldn't root for, but like, geez dude, can we get something else? At least with Lord Hater, you have the underlining doubt as he compares himself to Lord Dominator with Commander Peepers. This here is nearly every episode he tries this. It gets old.
They were all like, what? Who is this guy? Then I was like, serious? Then I was all...
We also learned that Lord Dominator is Lady Dominator. That comes into play in the next episode I wish to cover, the Battle Royale. So Wander wants to set up the new found out Lady Dominator with Lord Hater with the hopes that they stop being evil, because they realize they love each other. He's doing this by placing a tiny, not for real immortality ring that brings all of the villains together in a large scale war. But let's keep going. This episode, also being an extended episode like the season premiere and finale, culminates the feelings of a lot of characters towards one another. Not counting the finale, this is the best episode to portray Lord Hater's hate being used for quote good, as it's being fueled off of his disdain for Wander.
He ran off without thinking, even though I told him not to. Threw himself into a dangerous situation without any kind of plan or exit strategy, and left me behind to save his butt and clean up his mess. Do you have any idea what it's like to have a fool for a friend? And clean up his mess. Do you have any idea what it's like to have a fool for a friend?
Lord Commander and Sylvia have their long-awaited battle, which is great, but if we're talking comedy, this guy takes the cake.
I did it. So I'm gonna get this ring now, and I'm the greatest or whatever.
Wait, who are you?
I'm the terrible and super mean villain.
He's trying his best.
Something so and so. I'm really strong.
Look at this man. Oh my god.
I really should have put more thought into this. But cape. So
dude, put down the ring and come back when you're better prepared.
Yeah.
Put down the ring.
It's late. I've got this cape, so
dude, put down the ring and come back when you're better prepared.
He must be protected. This was such a great example of awkward comedy that it's one of my favorite moments in animation, period. Well, that and this instant KFC combo. We also get to see some creative villains, even if it is for a minute, which is a plus. The only thing of note here that I want to truly discuss is that slowly everyone gets a little bit more transparent. Peeper realizes that Hater may not always have what it takes. Sylvia realizes that Commander Peepers and her aren't so different. Wander learns that there are some things that possibly can't be solved with friendship. And Hater learns that Lord Dominator is a female, and reenacts my entire game as a boy on the internet from 12 to 14.
Hi, you, lady. So cool. Pretty. Not hate. Like.
I mean, there's a lot of action, but you kinda see that. I don't need to explain that. She does end up taking the ring, but nothing comes of it. Until the finale.
Feel like that was a poor choice of words.
Lord Dominator does what she did in the first episode she was in the special we just covered, and pretty much all the other episodes, dominate. She's pretty much taken over the entire galaxy at this point. What I appreciate from the beginnings of the finale is that it plants the seeds for Dominator's eventual outing of being lonely. She built bots, but the bots only go as far as they're programmed, and thus don't feel the same. She destroys the star, but it doesn't feel the same. Like other episodes, such as The Troll, a lot of her energy comes from the fact that she's antagonizing other real people, as real as this animation gets anyway. I also enjoy how Lord Hater silently gets up after seeing the last planet destroyed. As stubborn as he is loyal to his cause, and will go down with his ship. It was just such a subtle but neat scene that didn't bash me over the head with the fact that it's sinking in that he needs to put it all on the line. We also get some neat comedy.
Dominator has driven us from our homes and kept us on the run for an entire season of our lives.
Where has this guy been all season of our lives?
Sylvia tries to band them together in order to form a plan to take down Dominator, but they end up bickering with themselves. It comes to a height when Sylvia flat out tells Wander she has to stick with the crowd, the majority. They have to destroy Dominator. Wander's biggest mission is to now get Dominator to be not all that super evil and terrifying. Obviously, if you've been following this video up to this point, you know how fruitful that attempt will be.
I destroy your best friend, then I watch you cry.
This becomes a focal point of the story and a great twist. You see, Lord Hater essentially wanted to destroy Wander, but ever since the very first episode, he's been very clear that he wants to do it himself. It became apparent in the first episode of the second season, but comes to a height here. I love this scene so much because Dominator chooses to use emotional manipulation, knowing that Hater, while physically great, isn't mentally great. It almost gets to him before he gets exactly what he's wanted this entire season. Holy crap, that was amazing! Everything from the sound design to the way that they animate explosions was just phenomenal. Unfortunately, Wander was still within that ship. But I do want to highlight that Wander continuously tried to make a friend out of her, even pointing out that she's lonely. It's those tiny things in the dialogue that allows me to enjoy these special moments. It also creates one of those death fake out moments that many people don't seem to like. I actually don't mind them because while yes, Disney is not going to let Wander die, it does not impact my enjoyment of the finale. If anything, they've done death fake outs since the first episode of this season, with Wander nearly passing out before, so really it's nothing new.
What? Why did you save me? I tried to kill you.
Sure, you sort of tried to destroy him, so there'll be a few awkward dinner parties, but since you're for him, they can accept anybody. Hello to you! Folks call me Wander. That's my pal Sylvia. Welcome to the galaxy. We hope you will accept our humble gift of friendship.
Shut up! Ugh, you guys are so weird. I'm leaving. Didn't want to destroy your goofy little galaxy anyway.
It's such a shame. This is the one time I would have loved to see all of them come together and be friends, or at least all start from square one together, rather than her leaving. I get her being hardwired to be a loner, but at the same time, wow, she's really unlikable, and that's a good thing. Anyway, it ends with Hater being Hater, wanting to rule out the planets, pretty much like nothing happened, and that is the end of Wander Over Yonder. Where does Craig go from here? He's in the midst of a new show, Kid Cosmic. That's all we know. But I do know this. In the sea of realistic, dark, broody animation, if you just wander over yonder, you'll find a gem of what made cartoons cartoons in the first place. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next Rise and Fall. Just a short tidbit before the end card, these just wander over yonder, you'll find a gem of what made cartoons cartoons in the first place. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next Rise and Fall. Just a short tidbit before the end card, these just wander over yonder, you'll find a gem of what made cartoons cartoons in the first place. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the
As a
next
struggling
Rise and
actor, I need all the breaks that I can get. At Liberty
Just a short
Buchenwald.
tidbit before the
Liberty
end card,
Bibbert.
these James Baldwin once said, "The most dangerous creation of any society is the man who has nothing to lose." Although we have platforms like YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter where many creators build audiences with little money put in, that wasn't always the case. And generally, the one with the platform and audience determine the rules. Enter network television, the dominant form of media, destroying both radio and newspaper. This platform of audio-visual entertainment had the attention of the masses pre-internet, and when it came to children's entertainment, you had about 3 choices for a long while.
He's making the White House his home. How would he get past security? Corey in the house is next.
And when it came to children's entertainment, you had about Invader Zim is a great example of a creation that challenged the platform, both knowing its value and its message, and despite a rocky road, created such a good following that is still beloved to this day. So, what happened? I woke up one day to receive my 4th Nick box, a subscription box from Nickelodeon that caters to the 90s, early 2000s Nick crowd. It led me to think about the other Nickelodeon shows that I do not cover, or cover very little of, and that led me to Invader Zim. When you think about the shows that were airing around that time, Rocket Power, Hey Arnold, Rugrats, As Told by Ginger, these shows were bright, often fun, and optimistic. They featured characters with a can-do attitude in an environment that supports them. And these characters, since the beginning of storytelling, have been the go-to personality trait of main characters, even to this day with characters like Steven, Lincoln, Phineas, and SpongeBob. It's an admirable trait to give a character because it instills a great role model to children, especially in the 6 to 10-year-old range, before adolescence kicks in. However, Nickelodeon was planning to extend their reach to the 11 to 15-year-old range, and that's where Invader Zim comes along, but we're not there yet. Johnny the Little Homicidal Maniac was a comic strip started by high schooler at the time, Jonan Vasquez, born out of San Jose, California, attending Mr. Pleasant High School. This character, Johnny C, originated as a personal avatar who carried out Vasquez's own revenge fantasies, but was stressed to not be just an extension of his personality. Despite sending out these comics as slave labor graphics as samples, the company released 7 issues of this comic, based on the character alone, with an interview from Youth Radio stating, "It was just a natural evolution. Like I said, I didn't have a dream of making comics at all. I just do them. It just so happened that I got lucky enough to get them published. So nothing really changed from when I was a little kid to now. It's just that now I get paid for it, kind of." This created a side series around one of the characters, Squee, and it is with these comics that we get the attention from Nickelodeon, who wants to make a series around him. Not Squeeze, Jonan. Let's just make that clear. And at the time, Vasquez's stuff was not kid-friendly. In fact, in another interview, he says, "In certain ways, it is incredibly damaging considering the stuff I did before certainly wasn't for kids. I was never thinking, I hope the kids love this, when I was ripping out a guy's intestines, but now I have a lot of little kids who watch Invader Zim whenever they can find it on television. I get emails from kids saying, I'm 10 or 11 years old. I love Invader Zim. You're is cute, and I just picked up your Johnny book. It was this thinking that separated his thinking from Nickelodeon's thinking, and this dissonance would only get more apparent from here.
Look at him, Gaz. He doesn't like the cafeteria food.
I don't like it either.
I must be an alien too, huh, Deb?
As a pilot, there were a number of things that needed to be addressed, like who would voice him, which would change a lot, going from Mark Hamill to Billy West, and fully stayed on Richard Steven Horvitz.
What new kid? Who are you talking about? You're crazy.
Or even what the music would be, which was initially composed by Michael Tarvera, who created the music for Stitch the Movie and An American Trail, but later settled with Kevin Mentai, composer for music related to Generator X and The Sims 2. You can tell from these snippets that Jonan had a tunnel vision focus on exactly what he wanted, not leaving anything to the platform. And with March 30th, 2001, alongside the premiere of Butch Hartman's first Nickelodeon show, The Fairly Odd Parents, Invader Zim premiered. It starts out on such a wonderful day to accuse Zim of being an alien.
What's the matter? Scared of beans? Space boy?
They set up this pretty much at the beginning, showing that Dib and Zim already have self-awareness of each other's rivalry. While we do learn in the actual first episode why Zim is here, and how Dib and him began their rivalry, this pilot assumes that you'll get up to speed, and does a fine job not alienating anyone from the plot. I know, don't acknowledge it. In fact, their rivalry is public even with the teacher shutting him down for talking about the subject. Now the short is about Zim eating, and considering he's an alien, he doesn't digest real food. This is probably where you'll hear the biggest potential for Billy West.
I eat food, just like you. I have a stomach!
However, I feel like it's Horvitz's performance later on that would overshadow this, and give Zim the wackiness that his character demands. However, wackiness was just a part of the pie. For every cartoon around Invader Zim could be wacky, but the difference here was the dark undertones that, while in jest, had truth to them throughout the series. It was a very dirty, disgusting show, and while it appears funny, it's not a place you'd like to be. It comes to a height during this food fight segment, where although we see the looped animation quite noticeably, we see what the animation truly wants to offer. Although Invader Zim is about the constant struggle Dib goes through to expose Zim, who is trying to take over the world, the show takes great pride in its setting. This isn't just a lunchroom, but a futuristic minimalist war zone, and the duo battle in this both action-packed, but never to the point of taking it seriously scene.
You picked the wrong planet to land on, Zim. Wait a minute. What planet is this? Earth. Nope, it's the right planet.
Despite the fight itself being largely uneventful, the pilot taught me a lot about how the show will go, what the bare elements are stripped to its core, and the way Dib is viewed. No one really cares if Zim is an alien or not, so where does this drive come from? To prove them wrong? Well, all this comes together as a neat little pilot that ends with Dib being punished, but not stopping its chase to expose Zim. With such a promising pilot and first episode that I covered, Invader Zim was set off to carve a space on the network that was really bright, colorful, and optimistic. So let's talk about The Rise. It is clear that the show needed a lot of resources to look even halfway decent, let alone good, and that's because of the animation style. Invader Zim took a lot of CGI alongside 2D animation to look well, and if you don't know, CG stands for computer generated, a form of animation that would rise in the 2000s. Nowhere would this be emphasized more than in the wetting.
What's wrong, Zim? Don't they have rain on your planet? Of course. Such rain we had. It was delicious.
So as the alien stereotypes go, aliens have a rocky history with rain. This also means that Dib can and will exploit this weakness, which he does pretty easily. I'm really speechless here. We also get to see more of Gaz within this episode. She's generally off to herself because of her cynical and antisocial nature. She doesn't really have a good relationship with anyone besides maybe her dad. And I particularly love this moment here where rather than taking the umbrella that would help him from this downpour of rain, to just take Gaz. And the only thing that stopped him from being beat up is her brother's even larger incompetence. However, this episode is really just the battle of who can get back at whoever better, as many childhood rivalries are. The first half of this episode is just that, a rivalry. Zim gets back at Dib, Dib gets back at Zim with the water balloons, Dib shows Zim the water faucet, Zim learns about how paste makes him water resistant, and on and on and on. Now the second half of this episode is where things start to get fun. Both Dib and Zim come up with their big contraptions to take each other down, and it's just one space alien's perspective, and one very weird kid's perspective. And with that triggers the massive upstream of water into the sky. And you can see where most of the money went to in this episode, as this part looks very cool. Back in 2001, something like this doesn't really seem that easy to make, at least not on a television's cartoon's budget. And with that insane camera work that Invader Zim demands, it just makes it all the better. So all of this water goes into a giant space water balloon that Dib calls the Wettening, if you wanted to know where that episode name came from. I particularly want to praise this part here where the balloon gets bigger and the satellite gets smaller to emphasize the sheer space this balloon takes up. The way it drops down with Dib in pure disbelief is such a powerful way to show how high the ante was taken. I even love the way the water destroys everything. And I think this was such a great episode to show just how amazing the animation, art style, and general premise could come together and make a run-of-the-mill plot turn into a great execution. Mind you, the folks at Futurama were impressed with how Invader Zim wove the two animation styles into a solid unified look. However, with such great innovation came great challenges and the inevitable corporate pushback and meddling. And what better way to show this with one of the altered episodes.
My mom makes me eat breakfast chunks for breakfast, but I hate them. I hate them so much. Could I go back in time and stop them from ever being invented?
Time travel. I'm sure there's many of us who share the same sentiment that if we could, we'd alter or change something in the past to affect the present in a different way. However, the ramifications of this could be destructive, even with the slightest change being completely enough to shift everything that you know around. Now, Professor Membrane introduces the plot cleverly by showing a space-time object transfer device that he makes that Zim copies via television to take down Gib. As you can see, this is way different than a water balloon, and in fact, this gets much darker than either of the two episodes we talked about. So this episode follows a very orderly structure of slowly replacing common objects that Dib uses with pigs that end up being disastrous on his end. Like for example here, rather than riding a tricycle into the alien, I think, he rides this plush pig, which seriously hurts him. In fact, it hurts him so much that it affects him present day. This was a grim episode, and it does push the point that Invader Zim, while a show on Nickelodeon, wasn't always a show that you can show a child, at least without questions. However, on the bright side, literally, the show does have quite a bit of funny and cute moments, nearly all of them coming from Gur.
A hunter-destroyer, A hunter-destroyer.
What is it?
A hunter-destroyer machine.
Speaking of Gur, he talks about something that I'm super passionate about.
Wait, if you destroyed Dib in the past, then he won't ever be your enemy. Then you won't have to send a robot back to destroy him, and then he will be your enemy, so then you will have to send a robot.
Look, Limu! Someone needs help customizing and saving with Liberty Mutual!
Oh.
This is the grandfather paradox, a paradox being a seemingly logical statement that provides self-contradiction. And this paradox involves the concept of going back in time to alter something, which removes a reason in the new present for you to have gone back in time to alter said thing. It's like if you went back in time to kill your grandfather to stop yourself from being born, then who kills your grandfather? Because you're not there, but because you're actually now there, your grandfather wasn't killed, and that leads to you actually killing him, and it creates this time loop, as you can see. I'm glad the show is self-aware about the complexities of time travel because it actually interests me. Now the rest of this episode gets into some pretty twisted territory that I don't want to dwell on in case I want to return to this for a proper review. But slowly over time, the contraptions or common items that Dibs uses for his passion for catching the extraterrestrial turns into those same pigs that gruesomely turn Dib into more machine than man, as these machines are needed to help him keep alive. He deteriorates and loses his sanity due to this pig, but regardless still has a passion to attack and catch Zim to prove that the extraterrestrial life does exist. It also makes you think about the blurred lines of the protagonist and antagonist. Zim so far, while it appears that his intentions is to take over the world, has acted more like a child than anything. It has been Dib's constant pushing of Zim that makes us root for Zim. However, here, the episode starts off with Zim getting rid of Dib before Dib did anything. How could I root for Zim in this instance? This would be episode 14, around halfway into the series, with the creator confirming that these are self-contained storylines. So the argument that Dib was a threat before in other episodes is not valid. I can't root for Zim, and in this case, he truly is evil. Which, while good, to what limit? To the limit of killing a passionate young child? According to Jonan, this was going to be a permanent change that Nickelodeon stepped in and prevented. And usually I like to rally behind creators and get behind their work and push it out as is, but this is the rare time, the rare occasion that the corporation is right on the side of creativity. How would this episode play out if Dib were to die? Just because Zim woke up one morning and just wanted to do it? Even though he's not shown to be that competent in majority of other episodes? Sure, Zim would be an evil monster, but that's not what he's built up as. He's built up as a naive and constant learner of how Earth operates. And I would even argue that this is out of character for his plans to get this devious. And if he could do this, why would he have trouble with a bit of rain?
Come on, kid. If I lose one more patient today, I'm gonna get written up. Claire. Come on, kid. Claire. Oh, stay with me. Stay with me.
I wouldn't call this episode uncomfortable, not in the slightest, but just foreign, unneeded, somewhere in that area. Not for this show, not with this show's logic, definitely not on this network. However, of course, Dib doesn't die. He returns as a robot, to which Zim saves himself by preventing himself from throwing pigs in the past by replacing his past brain with a pig. This also explains why in the next episode he isn't brain dead, because every episode is in its own vacuum, self-contained. But just because this is one episode where I think Jonan went too far, let's go over the other times where I don't think it's that black and white. It would actually start with the second episode, Bestest Friend. It revolves around a clingy kid, Keith, and Zim's newfound relationship with Keith, to make sure that the people do not get suspicious that his lack of friends is deemed inhuman. However, despite it starting off very sweet, with Keith promising to be the bestest friend ever, Zim's need of his presence would be drastically cut short. But since Keith is very clingy, he sticks around Zim. This was a pretty decent episode. Nothing too notable happened in it. I mean, some people would even call it boring. We don't get too much sci-fi or alien elements, and Zim's mission is already sidetracked in the second episode for the mundane slice of life that doesn't fit this style of storytelling. It is actually what isn't in this episode that interests me. This is the only scene that involves Keith getting seriously hurt that stayed within the episode. Another scene proposed was Keith getting hit by a car. Nickelodeon deemed that too violent. But even more gruesome was Keith getting hit by electrical lines from really high up, which, wow, was rejected as Nickelodeon feared kids may imitate this behavior. All that stayed was Keith falling from a building after being attacked by a squirrel. The episode Hobo 13 does not have too much notable happening in it either. The environment and the sergeant, both of those things are pretty interesting. The monsters, kind of intriguing. Visually, this episode is pretty good, but the story here is pretty much what you would see in any Zim episode. However, what is of note here is that Zim assigns himself as the leader of a pack, and while leader, gradually sacrifices his teammates or his crew so that he can get to the finish line by himself. Somewhere within this episode, Scooge, shown on the screen, was going to be shown eating his own skin to survive, but that was changed to Scooge just surviving, but being used as a weapon when said monster now attacks the sergeant. I'm trying to visualize a safe way to do this in my head beyond implying it, which there isn't really any way, and I'm not alone on this matter. Even in hindsight, Jonan feels like that would have been way too far. Game Slave 2 is a Gaz-centered episode that shows a poor kid, Iggins, getting in the way of Gaz and the newest version of Game Slave 2.
Completed more mini-quests than are even in the game! That's how I know I'm pretty much the master of all reality and all that encompasses it, because, and then all of a sudden, everyone is clapping when I beat the final boss. I didn't think...
The episode spends a large majority of its time...
Everyone is clapping when I beat the final boss. I didn't think...
The episode spends a large majority of its time building Iggins as an annoying, self-centered, erratic kid. However, it highlights the persistence and eeriness of Gaz, which I do appreciate, at least in this episode. The length she goes through in Iggins's house alone was very well constructed. I particularly loved how it raises the ante of who's going to see the new levels in the game, but never overshoots the horror target. It's also a pretty funny episode that plays around with the horror tropes, such as the classic mirror and window reflection tropes. This episode doesn't feature Zim in it at all, with Div being in a small portion, with a really funny rat people joke that would fit in with how modern shows do humor. Gaz does end up getting the Game Slave 2, the same one that really didn't belong to either of them, but with their nefarious ways, it turns out to be more than a solid episode. The episode itself isn't the issue, but rather the name of the handheld console.
They're backed by the awesome power of the Game Slave 2! Check out these actual game screens! Are you still playing your old obsolete Game Slave 1? Why? What's wrong with you?
Originally, it was going to be the Game Slave Advance, similar to the Game Boy Advance. Apparently, Nintendo did not like this, and threatened legal action, so now we know it as the Game Slave. The horrifying attacks on September 11th were something that, while I didn't directly witness, I felt. Considering that New York is/was a large part of American culture, there are certain episodes across many shows that Nickelodeon altered after the event. Hey Arnold, taking place in a fictional city inspired by Brooklyn, among other cities, had episodes altered, and so did Invader Zim. Despite the fact that the 10th pair of episodes, Plague Babies and Blotty's Pizza Hog, would appear on September 7th, 2001, the next episode pair, Door to Door, and FBI Warning of Doom, would appear on March 29th, 2002. Why? Well, because in Door to Door originally was going to show a city demolished with clouds of smoke in the sky, but was quickly changed to a virtual reality city that does not depict anything that could remind you of said incident. Mind you, it isn't the city itself that depicts New York. In fact, it doesn't. It looks like any other city. It is because airing this episode as is around September of 2001 would have just been in poor taste potentially to the public. So it is with these plus more challenges that Jonan traded wins and losses with the network that created a struggle for Invader Zim. What exactly contributed to its fall? Well, I want to separate this into two big areas: the influence it had on a very safe network, and the cost it took to make the episodes versus the return the network received among fighting tooth and nail with the creator. So, let's talk about the fall.
Each of us has a purpose. We are destined to do something meaningful. What do you think a private Christian education looks like? GCU offers over 175 high-quality online programs. Find your purpose at Grand Canyon University. Visit gcu.edu.
To dive into both points, there is one episode within season 1 that goes over both the influence part and the profit/acceptance part, and does it in a way that I can explain both topics while also talking about a very interesting episode. So let's talk about the season finale, Tack, the hideous new girl.
Miss Bitters, I read that long ago people used to give out cards and candy on Valentine's Day. How did the whole meat thing get started? You don't want to know.
It starts off as a beautiful day, or as beautiful as it could be in Invader Zim. It centers around this new student, I say with implied air quotes, Tack, a new girl who both flees the classroom without knowing what they wanted before, and has this weird squirrel-looking slick being following her around.
Looks like Zim has a girlfriend. It's not nice to embarrass people. You should apologize and use your eraser. I'm sorry, Zim.
Jonan has been very firm with the fact that romance is not a big thing for Invader Zim. It is not a part of the viewpoint of how Invader Zim works. So when I saw that, I was really concerned that he had to buckle down and create something he didn't want to make. However, as far as romance goes, they take an alternate swing at it. Zim tries to be romantic to get Tack's affection, thus getting her trust and information on human affection. And Tack pretty much tortures Zim, much to Dib's amusement. But little do we know, Tack is more than just a weird girl. She's an
What is this? I'd been waiting years to take my final test to become one of the Urkin elite soldiers.
So, with a destroyed base, Zim has to turn to Dib. It's a great change of pace, and with the episodes we covered, seeing them cooperate would mean the common threat is actually really powerful. I also enjoyed the part where Zim talked to Professor Membrane. They actually subtly play the whole town is super trope really well, but he seems too busy to probably put the pieces together on Tack's future plan. In fact, the only person in this episode who doesn't play their part well is, well, Gaz. In many episodes I talk about, she's quite one-dimensional. I understand being cynical, pessimistic, or moody, but the idea is that at some point, you make a recurring character do something else. Now, while yes, she does get happier in other episodes, it's few and far in between. She does help, and I put the word help next to giant quotation marks, considering that it's Gur and the computer doing 99% of the work. Dib confronts Tack, who reveals her plan to use the hot dog stand as her base.
You can't do this! People will know something's up!
The great thing about your people, Dib, is that most of them don't notice. All they see is another faceless corporate venture, not a plan for world conquest.
Wow, Invader Zim was pretty ahead of its time. I say this as I upload this to a platform owned by a company owned by one of the biggest conglomerates. But nevertheless, the plan is to suck the magma out of Earth and shoot it into space, and fill the hollow hole with candy. And their plan is for Zim to battle Tack, Dib to shut the valve off, and Gur and Gas to help, still using those giant quotation marks. Now I just want to dedicate a bit of time to this amazing fight sequence. We see here Zim and Tack fighting over this CG magma, and it really shows here what the show wanted to do. Had this been 2D, it wouldn't have had that natural physics sort of feel, or the uncanniness of the primitive 3D animation feel. By doing it this way amongst the fight, it blends in and feels natural for the show. It gets to a high point where Zim actually doesn't defeat Tack. Now he's ignorant and doesn't understand that it actually is Dib and Gur who saved Earth, and he just sort of distracted Tack, who had a big but justifiable personal vendetta with Zim. It was also weird seeing the Earth deflate. Not because it's impossible, but how are you gonna fill it with candy? Now I'm getting off track. Okay, anyway, the Earth is saved because of a giant on and off switch. Don't ask about it, but this is where it gets good. That was such a great way to end the series. I wanted to know more. What would this lead to? Well, it led to the second season. And we're probably about 3/4 coming up towards the end of this video, and you're probably wondering why I didn't talk so much about the second season. Well, that's because there isn't much. There are 4 half-hour specials, among 10 episodes in total, but the season should have been much more than that. However, it was cancelled. It was popular among viewers 14 to 18, but not their target demographic, 2 to 11-year-olds. Because of this, among its influence and poor profit, led to its demise. So rather than getting 20 episodes, we get 10, And it gets even weirder. The last episode is the most horrible Xmas episode. And that's not me saying that it's a bad Christmas episode, that's the name of it. However, it features the characters introduced in episodes that have never aired. Legitimately, there are characters in the last episode of Invader Zim that show up that have never been in an episode previous because the episode that was supposed to introduce them were not able to air because Jonan Vasquez had to pick only a handful of episodes before Invader Zim was cancelled. This is Nickelodeon, guys. Now, the Invader Zim Wikia, huge shout out to them, they've been a really great help, has a few of these plots, some extended out and detailed, others just a general idea.
Oh, Bobby, it appears I need a refill. Thanks.
When people hear about the series being cancelled, it led with an uproar of its core fans making a petition to save the show. And wow, does history not change. If the 50 change.org petitions that get DM'd to me a day serves as anything. They receive over 50,000 signatures, but that wasn't enough to save the show. Maybe Invader Zim was on the wrong network. Maybe Nickelodeon got the wrong creator. Either way, Jonan buckled down since to not create anything unless he has the budget and freedom to do so, which is commendable. So where does this leave Zim? Well, the show would come back to air reruns that did really well. In fact, second best to Avatar. Jonan in his blog seemed pretty excited to hear about that. It premiered on Nick Splat in January 2nd of this year with a 7-hour marathon. Zim appears to be in Nickelodeon games as well, so he's pretty much still around. In fact, to read from the creator's mouth, this all came to be because the show simply doesn't die. It might be wrapped up in packing peanuts and shoved out of the way a bit, hidden even, but like the most determined child on the hunt for its father's handgun that they know is going to be a fun time. The audience just never let the show go, potentially to the aggravation of the network. You guys just don't shut up about it. And even though there will probably be no new episodes, it made a bunch of executives, people who seriously don't know what's happening, without polling actual human beings on it first, blink in confusion, irritation, and possibly wonder at this old show I came up with. To where they actually picked up the phone to discuss breathing just a bit more life into it. We made a pretty cool thing, and then we went away from it. But you guys, you never dropped it. You infected your children with it, and those kids infected their pets with it. I visit my wee nieces and nephews, and they talk about it like it's something that just came out. And they act out episodes, and when I'm done screaming at them to shut up, I think about how freaking cool it is to have infiltrated people's brains in such a cool way. And I wonder how I can use this to my criminal advantage someday. So while there were failed attempts to revive it as a series, both in 2010, when reruns were aired as a test to see if a revival would be feasible, and a blip of maybe a reboot in 2011, both attempts were pretty much
Need an advanced website for your business? First, go to Wix.com. I'm Margot from
fruitless.
People of Earth, did you really think you'd seen the last of me? Don't you know an invader never stops until their mission is complete? I've been watching you. No, Kerr, I'm being serious.
But I like your voice. It's funny.
I'm not being funny.
However, in 2017, April 4th, Nickelodeon would announce a 90-minute TV film that is set to come out 2019. Invader Zim Enter the Florpus is the closest thing in nearly 2 decades of Nickelodeon, not Nicktoons, premiering Zim. Will it be good? Will it lead to something bigger? Well, we'll have to find out. If you want to see the first episode of Invader Zim reviewed, click here. And if you want to see everything you need to know about Invader Zim Enter the Florpus, click here. Thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, take care. Alpha out.